The ballroom fell silent as Lady Eliza Hartwell walked through the gilded doors alone, again. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Where is the Duke? They say he hasn't spoken to her in weeks. Poor thing, married to a man who treats her like a ghost." Society's cruelest weapons weren't swords, they were smirks and sideways glances. But tonight, something in Eliza's eyes had changed. She wasn't here to beg for scraps of attention anymore. She was here to rewrite every rule they'd used to cage her. This is her story, a tale of survival, defiance, and a love that refused to be ignored. Stay until the end to see how a forgotten duchess became unforgettable. Drop a like and tell us what city you're watching from. The rain hammered against the windows of Hartwell Manor with the kind of relentless fury that seemed to mock every careful plan laid by human hands. Inside the drawing room, 23-year-old Lady Eliza Hartwell sat with her spine perfectly straight, her hands folded in her lap, listening to her father negotiate her future as if she were a prize mare at auction. "The Duke of Ashford has made his intentions clear," Lord Hartwell said, his voice carrying the weight of relief mixed with something close to desperation. "He seeks a wife of impeccable reputation, good breeding, and the intelligence to manage his estates during his frequent absences. You, Eliza, fit his requirements precisely." Eliza's mother, Lady Catherine, dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. "Oh, my darling girl, a duchess! Can you imagine? The Duke of Ashford himself." Requirements. The word lodged in Eliza's chest like a stone. Not desires, not hopes. Requirements. She was being selected the way one might choose sturdy furniture, functional, reliable, unlikely to cause trouble. "Have you met him, father?" Eliza asked, her voice carefully neutral. She had learned long ago that showing too much emotion in her family's presence was perceived as weakness. "Twice. He is a serious man, dedicated to his responsibilities. His first marriage ended tragically. His wife died in childbirth along with the infant. That was 7 years ago. He has avoided society since then, but now he recognizes his duty to secure the succession." "How romantic," Eliza murmured, so quietly that her mother didn't hear, but her father's eyes sharpened. "Romance is a luxury for poets and fools, Eliza. You will have security, status, and a position of immense influence. Most women would consider themselves blessed beyond measure." Most women haven't spent their lives being told their worth depends entirely on their ability to fade into the background, Eliza thought. But she simply nodded. The truth was, she had no real choice. Her father's investments had failed spectacularly over the past 2 years. The family's fortune was hanging by a thread so thin that one more social season without a match would have spelled disaster. Her younger sisters needed dowries. Her brother needed to complete his education. The weight of her family's survival rested on her shoulders like an iron yoke. "When will the wedding take place?" she asked. 3 weeks. The Duke wishes for a quiet ceremony. No fuss." "Of course not," Eliza thought bitterly. "Why celebrate when you're simply fulfilling an obligation?" The wedding day arrived with merciless efficiency. St. George's Chapel was nearly empty, just immediate family and a handful of witnesses required by law. Eliza wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slighter frame, and carried a small bouquet of white roses that seemed to wilt even as she held them. She saw her future husband for the first time as she walked down the aisle. Duke Nathaniel Ashford stood at the altar like a statue carved from granite and ice. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that fell across his forehead despite obvious attempts to tame it. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of a winter storm. He was, objectively, extraordinarily handsome. He was also, quite clearly, furious about something. His expression never changed as she approached. No smile, no warmth, just a cold, assessing gaze that seemed to catalog her features and find them adequate. The ceremony was brief. Eliza spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, though her hands trembled slightly as Nathaniel slid the heavy gold ring onto her finger. His touch was impersonal, efficient, the same way one might handle a legal document requiring a signature. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Nathaniel turned to her with mechanical precision and pressed his lips to her cheek for exactly 1 second. It was the coldest kiss Eliza had ever received. "Your Grace," he said formally, acknowledging her new title. Then he turned and walked back down the aisle without offering his arm. Eliza stood there for a moment, stunned, before gathering her skirts and following him alone. Behind her, she heard her mother's nervous titter and the whispered condolences of guests, who suddenly understood exactly what kind of marriage this would be. The journey to Ashford Hall took 6 hours by carriage. Nathaniel rode separately on horseback, claiming business required his immediate attention along the route. Eliza sat alone in the luxurious carriage, watching the countryside roll past and wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. No, she corrected herself firmly. You made the only choice available. Now you must make the best of it. Ashford Hall revealed itself gradually as the carriage climbed the long, winding drive through an ancient forest of oak and ash. When they finally emerged from the trees, Eliza's breath caught despite her determination to remain composed. The estate was magnificent. The main house sprawled across the landscape like a sleeping giant. 3 stories of honey-colored stone with wings extending in both directions. Formal gardens stretched toward distant hills, and beyond them, she could see tenant cottages dotting the landscape. This wasn't just a house. It was a kingdom, and she had just become its queen. If only the king would acknowledge her existence. Mrs. Holloway, the housekeeper, greeted her at the entrance, a stern woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and an expression that suggested she had seen every kind of duchess the world could produce and found most of them wanting. "Your Grace," she said, curtsying with precise correctness, "welcome to Ashford Hall. His Grace sent word that you are to be shown to your chambers. He has business in London and will return in 3 days." Eliza blinked. 3 days? But we were only just married this morning. Mrs. Holloway's expression didn't change. "Yes, Your Grace. This way, please." The housekeeper led her through a bewildering maze of corridors, past rooms filled with priceless art and furniture that spoke of centuries of wealth and power. Finally, they arrived at a suite of rooms in the east wing. "These are the Duchess's chambers," Mrs. Holloway announced, pushing open ornate double doors. The rooms were beautiful, elegantly furnished with silk wallpaper in pale blue, a massive 4-poster bed, a sitting area before a fireplace, and windows overlooking the gardens. They were also, Eliza noticed immediately, at the opposite end of the house from what must be the Duke's chambers. "Where are His Grace's rooms?" she asked carefully. "West wing, Your Grace, the master suite." An entire wing away. The message couldn't have been clearer if Nathaniel had sent it in writing. "We may be married, but we will not be sharing a life." After Mrs. Holloway left, Eliza sank onto the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. The wedding ring felt impossibly heavy, a golden shackle she would wear for the rest of her life. Around her, the enormous house seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Distant footsteps, the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through countless corridors. 50 rooms, she would later learn. 50 rooms, and she had never felt more alone. That night she cried for exactly 10 minutes, allowing herself that small weakness. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her spine, and made a decision that would change everything. If I cannot have his affection, I will have his respect. If I cannot be his wife in truth, I will be the finest duchess this estate has ever known. I will not fade away. I will not become invisible. I will prove to everyone, including him, that I am more than a convenient solution to his succession problem. It was a declaration of war, though she didn't fully realize it yet. Not against her husband, but against every expectation that had been placed upon her since birth. She was done being the quiet, obedient girl who made herself small to fit into spaces designed by others. Lady Eliza Hartwell was gone. In her place stood the Duchess of Ashford, and she was going to become unforgettable. The next morning, Eliza woke before dawn and immediately rang for her lady's maid. A young woman named Mary appeared, looking nervous and exhausted. "I apologize for the early hour, Your Grace. I wasn't expecting, that is," Mrs. Holloway said. "Mary," Eliza interrupted gently, "how long have you worked at Ashford Hall?" 3 years, Your Grace." "And in that time, how many other ladies' maids have there been?" Mary's face flushed. 5, Your Grace. The position is difficult. His Grace prefers the household to run without disturbance, and previous duchesses, there wasn't a duchess, but when there were important guests—" She trailed off, clearly afraid she'd said too much. Eliza studied the girl carefully. "I see. Well, Mary, I intend to make changes, many changes, If you're willing to work hard and speak honestly when I ask you questions, you'll find me a far easier mistress than you might fear. Do we have an understanding?" Mary's eyes widened. "Yes, Your Grace." Thank you, Your Grace." "Good. Now, I need a complete tour of the house and grounds, and I need to meet every member of the staff. We'll start with breakfast in an hour. Can you have cook prepare something simple? The breakfast room is set for His Grace's return. I'll take breakfast in the morning room instead. And Mary? In future, I'll take all my meals wherever I choose, regardless of what rooms have been traditionally used. This is my home now." It was a small rebellion, but Mary's face lit up as if Eliza had just declared independence from the crown itself. "Yes, Your Grace. Right away, Your Grace." Over the next 3 days, the 3 days Nathaniel was absent, Eliza systematically learned everything about Ashford Hall. She walked every corridor, inspected every room, and spoke with every member of the staff from the head butler down to the youngest scullery maid. What she discovered appalled her. The estate was wealthy beyond measure, but it was also deeply broken. The previous duke, Nathaniel's father, had been a tyrant who ruled through fear and punished any deviation from rigid tradition. Nathaniel had inherited those systems and, consumed by his own grief and obligations, had simply maintained them without question. The servants worked brutal hours for minimal wages. The tenant farmers were squeezed for every penny, while their cottages fell into disrepair. The kitchens were dangerously understaffed. The stables were filthy. The once magnificent gardens had been left to grow wild because His Grace has no interest in flowers. But it was the village of Ashford-on-the-Green that broke Eliza's heart. She rode there on her second day, accompanied only by a groom who seemed terrified that she would tell the Duke about the journey. The village was a collection of perhaps 50 cottages clustered around a Norman church, a smithy, and a small market square. It should have been thriving. The estate was prosperous, after all. Instead, she found poverty that made her chest ache. Children with hollow eyes and ragged clothes, cottages with holes in their roofs, an elderly woman carrying water from the stream because the village well had collapsed 2 years ago and no one had bothered to repair it. "Your Grace!" The village priest, Father Benedict, hurried over when he spotted her. He was young, perhaps 30, with kind eyes and a worn cassock that had been mended many times. "We weren't expecting, that is, His Grace usually sends his steward." "I'm not His Grace," Eliza said quietly. "I'm the new Duchess, and I'd like to understand what's happening here. Will you walk with me?" Father Benedict's face transformed with desperate hope. "Of course, Your Grace, of course." He told her everything. The previous duke had extracted maximum revenue from the village while providing minimum support. Nathaniel had continued the same policies, though Benedict didn't think it was from cruelty, more from absence and ignorance. "His Grace is rarely here," the priest explained. "He's often in London, managing political affairs and his various business ventures. The steward, Mr. Wickham, handles the estate, and he follows the old duke's methods." "Where is Mr. Wickham now?" Eliza asked. "London, Your Grace. He accompanies His Grace on most trips." "Of course he does," Eliza thought grimly. "My husband is so surrounded by yes-men that he has no idea what's actually happening in his own domain." She spent the rest of that day in the village, talking to families, making notes, and promising that things would change. Many of them looked at her with the weary skepticism of people who had heard such promises before and seen nothing come of them. "I know you have no reason to believe me," she told a group of mothers gathered near the broken well. "But I give you my word as Duchess of Ashford. This will be repaired. Your children will have clean water." One of the women, her face weathered beyond her years, met Eliza's eyes with a gaze that held both defiance and desperate hope. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but the last 2 ladies who visited from the hall said similar things. Nothing changed." "Those ladies," Eliza said firmly, "were not the Duchess. I am. And I don't make promises I can't keep." On the 3rd evening, Nathaniel returned. Eliza was in the library, a magnificent room that clearly hadn't been used in years, when she heard the commotion in the entrance hall. She closed her book, a treatise on modern agricultural methods that she'd found buried under layers of dust, and smoothed her dress. Her heart was racing, but she kept her expression calm. "You are a duchess," she reminded herself. "Act like one." Nathaniel appeared in the library doorway, still wearing his traveling clothes, his face dark with something between exhaustion and irritation. "You're using this room," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, it's a library. I read. It seemed a logical choice." His jaw tightened. "This was my father's private study." "Then I'm sure he'd be devastated to know it's been sitting empty for years, gathering dust while thousands of pounds worth of books slowly decay." Eliza set down her book and stood, meeting his gaze directly. "Welcome home, Your Grace. I trust your business in London was successful." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she wasn't cowering or apologizing. "It was adequate. I see you've been settling in." "Extensively. I've toured the house, met the staff, and visited the village." His expression hardened. "You went to the village without my permission?" "I wasn't aware I needed permission to travel within my own estate, or perhaps you'd prefer I'd asked Mrs. Holloway. Or should I have waited 3 days for your return and then requested a formal appointment?" The sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable, and Nathaniel's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You will not speak to me that way." "Then you will not treat me like a child who requires permission to walk out the front door. I am your wife and your Duchess, whether you like it or not. I will fulfill my duties to this estate, even if you choose to fulfill only your duties to yourself." For a long moment, they stared at each other across the library, the air between them crackling with tension. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs, but she refused to look away first. Finally, Nathaniel spoke, his voice dangerously soft. "You know nothing about my duties or my responsibilities. You have been here 3 days. Do not presume to lecture me about my own estate." "Then perhaps you should enlighten me," Eliza shot back. "Explain to me why the village well has been broken for 2 years. Explain why your tenant farmers are living in cottages with collapsing roofs, while your stables house horses in better conditions than your own people. Explain why your household staff works themselves to exhaustion while you pay them wages that wouldn't keep a London beggar fed." Nathaniel's face had gone from angry to utterly cold. "You overstep, madam." "I haven't even begun to step," Eliza said, her voice shaking slightly but her gaze steady. "You married me to be your Duchess. Very well. I intend to be exactly that, and that means caring for the people who depend on us, whether you choose to or not. The estate is managed by my steward according to systems that have worked for generations. Worked for whom? Certainly not for the people who are suffering under them. Your father's systems were cruel, and you've maintained them out of either ignorance or apathy. I don't yet know which, but I intend to change them regardless." She watched his hands curl into fists at his sides. For a moment she wondered if she'd pushed too far, if the cold Duke would explode into rage. But instead he simply turned toward the door. "You will make no changes to estate management without consulting me first," he said without looking back. "That is an order, not a request." "And when will this consultation occur? Should I send letters to London and wait weeks for a response while children drink contaminated water and roofs cave in?" He paused in the doorway, his back rigid. "You are my wife. You will obey me." "I am your Duchess," Eliza corrected quietly. "And I will do what is right, with or without your approval. If you wish to stop me, you'll have to lock me in my chambers, and I suspect society would find that rather difficult to explain." Nathaniel turned slowly, and for the first time Eliza saw something other than cold indifference in his eyes. It was shock, mixed with something that might have been grudging respect. "You are not what I expected," he said finally. "Good," Eliza replied, "because what you expected was a decorative doll who would sit quietly in her chambers and cause no trouble. You chose the wrong woman for that role." Another long silence stretched between them. Then, to her surprise, the corner of Nathaniel's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Mrs. Holloway tells me you've been terrorizing the staff with demands for tours and meetings. I prefer to think of it as conducting a thorough inventory of my domain." "Your domain?" "Our domain," Eliza corrected. "Though since you seem determined to spend most of your time in London, I suppose the day-to-day management will fall to me, unless you'd prefer to fire your steward and handle it yourself." Nathaniel's jaw worked as if he were physically restraining himself from responding. Finally, he said, "You may repair the village well, But you will present me with a full accounting of costs, and you will make no other changes without my explicit approval. Am I clear?" It was a small victory, but Eliza recognized it for what it was, an opening. "Crystal clear, Your Grace. Will you be staying at the Hall or returning to London?" "I have meetings in London tomorrow evening. I leave at dawn." "Of course you do," Eliza thought, but all she said was, "Then I won't keep you. I'm sure you're eager to rest before your journey." Nathaniel studied her for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a curt nod and left the library without another word. Eliza waited until his footsteps faded before sinking back into her chair. Her hands were shaking badly now, adrenaline flooding through her veins. She had just challenged a duke, her husband, to his face, and somehow survived the encounter. More than survived. She'd won a concession. It was a small crack in his armor of indifference, but small cracks had a way of growing. Eliza picked up her book and forced herself to read, though the words swam before her eyes. She had taken her first step on a long and treacherous path. There was no turning back now. Over the next 2 weeks, Eliza threw herself into transforming Ashford Hall with the intensity of a general planning a campaign. True to his word, Nathaniel had left at dawn and hadn't returned. He'd sent exactly one letter, a terse note approving the well repair and reminding her that further expenditures required his authorization. Eliza read the letter, smiled grimly, and continued with her plans. The first thing she did was summon the household staff for a meeting in the servants' hall, something that apparently had never happened in the estate's entire history. Mrs. Holloway looked scandalized, but Eliza was the Duchess, and even the steely housekeeper couldn't refuse a direct order. 37 people crowded into the room, ranging from the distinguished head butler, Mr. Davies, to 12-year-old Tommy, the boot boy. They looked nervous, whispering among themselves and shooting anxious glances at Eliza. She stood before them, hands clasped, and took a deep breath. "I've asked you all here because I need to tell you something important. This estate is broken. The way you've been treated is unconscionable. The hours you work, the wages you receive, the conditions you endure, all of it needs to change. And it will change, starting today." Shocked silence greeted her words. Then a middle-aged cook named Mrs. Patterson spoke up, her voice trembling. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but His Grace won't approve such changes. The old Duke, he ran things a certain way, and His Grace maintains systems he inherited without examining whether they're just or effective," Eliza interrupted. "But I'm not maintaining them. I am changing them. And if His Grace takes issue with that, he can take it up with me directly." She proceeded to outline her plans: reduced working hours, increased wages, better food and accommodations for the staff, and most radically, 1 full day off per month for every servant. The room erupted in whispers that grew to excited chatter. "Can you really do this?" asked Mary, her lady's maid, "without His Grace's approval?" Eliza smiled. "I am the Duchess of Ashford. The household management is my domain. His Grace may handle the business affairs and agricultural decisions, but the staff answers to me. Unless he wants to come home and personally manage every housekeeper and cook, he'll have to accept my changes." It was a calculated gamble. She was relying on Nathaniel's disinterest in domestic affairs, and his pride. A duke who publicly overruled his wife on household matters would look petty and controlling. She was betting he would consider it beneath his dignity to fight over servant wages and working hours. The staff's transformation was immediate and remarkable. With better conditions and actual motivation to excel, they threw themselves into their work with renewed energy. Within days, the house gleamed. Rooms that had been closed for years were opened, cleaned, and restored. The gardens, which Eliza put under the care of an elderly groundskeeper who'd been relegated to the stables, began their slow journey back to magnificence. But Eliza's ambitions extended far beyond the house itself. She rode to the village nearly every day, always accompanied by a groom who'd stopped trying to dissuade her. She met with Father Benedict, the village blacksmith, the school teacher, and anyone else who had insights into the community's needs. She took meticulous notes and began crafting plans. The well was repaired within a week. Eliza had simply sent a note to the estate steward's assistant demanding immediate action, and the man had been too frightened of the new Duchess to refuse. But that was only the beginning. She identified 10 cottages in critical disrepair and hired local men to fix them, paying from household accounts she was technically authorized to manage. She arranged for the village school to receive new books and supplies. She started a program to provide weekly medical visits from a doctor in the nearest town, paid for through what she delicately called reallocation of unnecessary household expenditures. Was she overstepping her authority? Absolutely. Would Nathaniel be furious when he discovered the extent of her activities? Probably. Did she care? Not even slightly. Because something was happening that she hadn't anticipated. The people were starting to look at her differently. The wary skepticism in their eyes was gradually being replaced by something else. Hope, respect, and for the first time in her life, Eliza felt like she was doing something that truly mattered. One afternoon, she was visiting a cottage where she'd arranged for roof repairs when an elderly woman named Mrs. Blackwood took her hand. "Your Grace," the woman said, her eyes bright with tears, "my grandbabies were sleeping under a bucket last week to keep dry. Now look." She pointed to the freshly thatched roof above them. "You've given us back our home." Eliza squeezed her hand gently. "You shouldn't have been living in such conditions in the first place. This estate has the resources to care for everyone properly. It's simply a matter of ensuring those resources are used correctly." Mrs. Blackwood smiled, revealing gaps where teeth had been. "The village talks about you, you know. They call you the Angel of Ashford." Eliza laughed, though her throat was tight with emotion. "I'm no angel. I'm simply doing what should have been done years ago." "Maybe so. But His Grace never did it. His father never did it. You did. That matters, Your Grace. That matters more than you know." On the ride back to the hall, Eliza found herself blinking back tears. She'd spent her entire life being told that her value lay in being quiet, obedient, and decorative. Now, for the first time, people were seeing her, truly seeing her, not as an ornament or obligation, but as someone who could change their lives for the better. It was intoxicating, it was terrifying, and she wanted more of it. The reckoning came exactly 3 weeks after the wedding. Eliza was in the morning room reviewing accounts when Mr. Davies appeared, looking pale. "Your Grace, His Grace has returned. He requests your presence in the library immediately." Requests. She knew what that meant. Nathaniel was furious, and he wanted a private confrontation. "Good," she thought, closing her account book with deliberate care. "It's past time we had a real conversation." She found him standing before the library fireplace, still in his traveling clothes, holding what appeared to be a lengthy letter. His face was a mask of tightly controlled fury. "Did you," he said without preamble, his voice dangerously soft, "dismiss my steward?" "I suspended him pending investigation," Eliza corrected calmly. "After discovering he'd been embezzling from the estate for at least 3 years, would you prefer I'd allowed him to continue stealing from you?" Nathaniel's hand crushed the letter. "You had no authority." "I had every authority. I am the Duchess of Ashford, and when I discovered evidence of theft, I acted. Or should I have sent a letter to London and waited weeks while your steward covered his tracks and disappeared with more of your money?" "You should have consulted me. And you should have been here." The words exploded out of Eliza before she could stop them. "You should have been here managing your own estate instead of abandoning it, and me, to pursue whatever mysterious business keeps you perpetually in London. You married me to be your Duchess. Well, I'm being exactly that, whether it meets with your approval or not." Nathaniel threw the letter onto his desk. "You've spent thousands of pounds without authorization. You've reorganized the entire household staff. You've interfered in village affairs. I've repaired cottages that were falling down. I've ensured your tenants have clean water. I've started a medical program that will save lives. I've uncovered corruption in your own steward's office. And yes, I've spent money doing it, but every penny is accounted for, and the expenditures are a fraction of what your previous steward was stealing annually. So unless you'd like to tell me that you prefer corrupt officials and dying tenants to a wife who actually cares about your estate, I suggest you sit down and listen." She watched the color drain from his face, then flood back with renewed anger. But beneath the fury, she saw something else. He was actually listening. Eliza pressed her advantage. "You wanted a duchess who could manage your household and estates. I am managing them. You wanted someone who wouldn't embarrass you in society. I haven't. You wanted someone who would produce an heir. Well, that rather requires you to actually be present occasionally, doesn't it?" That last comment was a low blow, and she knew it. But she'd grown so tired of his cold indifference, his constant absences, his treatment of their marriage as nothing more than a tedious obligation. Nathaniel's eyes flashed with something dark and intense. For a moment she thought he might actually explode. Instead, he walked to his desk, poured himself a glass of brandy with a hand that shook slightly, and drank it in one swallow. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said finally, his voice rough. "Then explain it to me. Explain why you married me if you had no intention of allowing me to actually be your wife. Explain why you spent our wedding night traveling to London instead of—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Instead of what?" His voice was harsh. Instead of playing the attentive bridegroom? Instead of pretending this is some fairy tale romance instead of what it actually is? A practical arrangement between two people doing their duty? Is that what you think marriage is? Duty and nothing else? It's what I know it is, he said bitterly. Love is a fiction sold to naive girls who don't understand how the world actually works. Eliza stared at him and suddenly understood. This wasn't about her at all. This was about whatever had happened in his first marriage, the tragedy that had turned him into this cold, distant man. "What happened to your first wife?" she asked softly. The change in him was immediate and devastating. His face went white. His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. "That," he said with deadly quiet, "is none of your concern." "I think it is. I think whatever happened to her is the reason you're so determined to keep me at arm's length. But I'm not her, Nathaniel. I'm not whoever hurt you so badly that you've decided to spend your life hiding from any real human connection." "You know nothing. I know that you're terrified," Eliza interrupted. "I know that you'd rather work yourself to exhaustion in London than face the possibility of actually having a real marriage. I know that you're so determined to keep me in my place that you can't even see that I could be your partner instead of your burden." Nathaniel set down his glass with enough force that she was surprised it didn't shatter. "This conversation is over." "No, it's not. You don't get to summon me, yell at me, and then dismiss me like a servant. I'm your wife, and you're going to listen to me." "I don't have to listen to anything. You've overstepped your bounds repeatedly, and what? You'll send me away? Lock me in my chambers? Go ahead. Do it. Let society see exactly what kind of husband you are. Let them whisper about how the great Duke of Ashford is so cruel to his young wife that he has to imprison her. I'm sure that will do wonders for your reputation." They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the air between them charged with emotions neither could fully name. Finally, Nathaniel turned away, staring out the window at the darkening gardens. "What do you want from me?" he asked, and for the first time his voice held something other than anger. It held exhaustion, confusion, maybe even a hint of desperation. "I want a partnership," Eliza said quietly. "I want a husband who sees me as more than a convenient solution to his succession problems. I want to build something meaningful here, not just maintain systems that are broken. And I want you to stop running away from the possibility that this marriage could actually become something real." "Real," he repeated bitterly. "You have no idea what you're asking for." "Then tell me. Help me understand. Because right now, all I see is a man so determined to protect himself from being hurt that he's built walls no one could possibly scale. And I'm tired of throwing myself against them." Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low she had to strain to hear it. "My first wife, Elena. I thought I loved her. I thought she loved me. I was young enough to believe those fairy tales you seem to want so badly. Then I learned that she'd married me for my title and my money, that she'd been having an affair with my closest friend, that the child she was carrying, the child that killed her, might not have even been mine. She died hating me, and I—" He stopped, his hands clenched on the windowsill. "I learned that love is a weapon people use to destroy you. I will not be destroyed again." The pain in his voice was so raw that Eliza's anger evaporated instantly. She wanted to go to him, to touch him, to offer comfort, but she knew instinctively that he would reject it. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I'm not Elena. I didn't marry you for your title or your wealth. I barely had a choice in the matter at all. And I certainly haven't been having affairs. I've barely left the estate." "Yet," he said. "Ever," she corrected firmly. "I may not have married you for love, but I married you with every intention of honoring my vows. Can you say the same?" He turned to look at her then, and for the first time she saw genuine uncertainty in his eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know if I can be what you want me to be." "Then be what you can be. Be present. Be honest. Give me a chance to prove that not every woman is like Elena. Give us a chance to build something better than what we have now." For a moment she thought he might actually agree, but then his expression hardened again, the walls slamming back into place. "I'll be staying at the hall for the next week. During that time, we'll review all the changes you've made and determine which ones are sustainable. You will not make any further expenditures without my explicit approval. And you will remember, Eliza, that partnership requires two people who are equals. We are not equals. I am the Duke, and you are your Duchess," she finished, her voice cold again. "Yes, I know. You've made that abundantly clear. But let me be equally clear. I will not stop caring for the people who depend on us. I will not sit quietly in my chambers like a good little doll. And I will not apologize for doing the job you married me to do, even if you're too damaged to appreciate it." She turned and walked to the door, then paused. "Dinner is at 8. I assume you'll be joining me, or will you take it in your study to maintain our careful distance?" "Eliza, I'll see you at 8, Your Grace. Try to work up some enthusiasm. The staff will think we've had a row if you glower at me the entire meal." She left before he could respond, her head held high despite the tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. Behind her, in the library, Nathaniel stood alone in the gathering darkness, his reflection ghostly in the window glass. For the first time since Elena's death, he felt the walls he'd built around his heart beginning to crack. And he wasn't sure if that terrified him more than anything else she'd said. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in civilized hostility. They sat at opposite ends of an absurdly long mahogany table in the formal dining room, a space clearly designed to emphasize distance rather than intimacy. Crystal chandeliers cast wavering light across silver serving dishes and porcelain so fine it was nearly translucent. Between them stretched 12 feet of polished wood and a chasm of unspoken resentment. Nathaniel ate with mechanical precision, his expression revealing nothing. Eliza matched him course for course, her posture perfect, her manners impeccable. To any observer, they would have appeared the picture of aristocratic propriety. Only the servants, moving silently around them, sensed the tension thick enough to choke on. "The pheasant is excellent," Nathaniel said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched through the soup and fish courses. "Mrs. Patterson will be pleased to hear it," Eliza replied coolly. She was concerned the new kitchen schedule wouldn't allow sufficient time for proper preparation. I assured her that feeding the household well was worth any inconvenience to outdated timing traditions. It was a deliberate jab, a reminder that she'd reorganized the kitchen rotations over his steward's objections. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. They finished the meal in hostile silence. When the final course was cleared, Nathaniel stood. "I have correspondence to address. Good evening, madam." "Good evening, Your Grace," Eliza replied with exaggerated politeness. "I trust you'll find your study comfortable. I had the staff air it out thoroughly. It smelled rather musty from disuse." His eyes flashed, but he simply nodded and left. Eliza remained at the table long after he'd gone, staring at the empty chair where her husband should have been. The chair where, in another life, a different marriage, they might have lingered over wine and conversation, might have smiled at each other, might have moved towards something resembling actual partnership. Instead, she had this: a beautiful prison, a cold husband, and a growing determination to prove that she didn't need his approval to matter. Fine, she thought, rising from the table with renewed resolve. If he won't be my partner, I'll build my own legacy, with or without him. The next morning, Eliza was reviewing restoration plans for the East Gardens when Mary rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. "Your Grace! There's a carriage arriving, a very fine one. Mrs. Holloway thinks it might be Lady Ashford." Eliza's stomach dropped. The Dowager Duchess? Nathaniel's mother was supposed to be abroad, touring the continent. No one had mentioned she was returning. "Yes, Your Grace. She's just coming up the drive now." Eliza barely had time to check her reflection and smooth her dress before Mrs. Holloway appeared to announce the Dowager's arrival. Moments later, a woman swept into the drawing room with the commanding presence of a conquering general. Lady Margaret Ashford was in her late 50s, tall and imposing, with silver hair arranged in elaborate curls and eyes that missed nothing. She wore traveling clothes of deep purple, half mourning colors she'd adopted after her husband's death and apparently never abandoned. Her gaze raked over Eliza with an intensity that made even the new Duchess want to fidget. "So," Lady Margaret said without preamble, "you're the girl my son married without bothering to inform me." Eliza curtsied, keeping her voice steady. "Lady Ashford, what an unexpected pleasure. We didn't know you'd returned from Italy." "Obviously." The dowager settled into a chair as if she were claiming a throne. "I only learned of the wedding through a letter from my sister in London, 3 weeks after the fact. Imagine my surprise to discover my son had acquired a wife and apparently forgotten to mention it." "The wedding was quite sudden, my lady. I believe His Grace intended to write once you returned—" "Nonsense. Nathaniel has been avoiding me since he was 12 years old. He probably hoped I'd stay abroad until the deed was done, and he could present me with a grandchild as a fait accompli." Lady Margaret studied Eliza with those sharp eyes. "Though I see no evidence of that particular development yet." The comment was so blunt that Eliza felt heat flood her cheeks. "We've only been married a short time, my lady." "Yes, well, time has little to do with it when a husband spends most of his nights in London rather than in his wife's bed." The silence that followed was excruciating. Eliza struggled to find a response that wouldn't betray just how accurate that observation was. Lady Margaret's expression softened slightly. "So it's like that, is it? He's keeping you at arm's length, playing the cold duke while he nurses his wounds over Elena's betrayal." "You know about—" "Of course I know. I'm his mother. I also know that Elena was a manipulative, unfaithful creature who used my son abominably. What I don't know is why he thinks the solution is to marry another poor girl and then freeze her out completely." "Where is Nathaniel?" "In his study, I believe. He's been reviewing estate accounts since breakfast." "Hiding, more like?" Lady Margaret rang for tea with the casual authority of someone who'd been mistress of this house for 3 decades. "Very well, he can sulk in his study while you and I become acquainted. I want to know everything about you, child, and more importantly, I want to know what you intend to do about my son's appalling behavior." Over the next hour, Eliza found herself being thoroughly interrogated by the dowager. But unlike Nathaniel's cold questioning, Lady Margaret's interest seemed genuine. She asked about Eliza's family, her education, her interests, and she listened to the answers with real attention. "You read agricultural treatises?" Lady Margaret said with evident surprise. "Voluntarily?" "I find them fascinating. The new crop rotation methods could increase yields by nearly 30% while improving soil quality." "And you've implemented these theories?" "Not yet. His Grace needs to approve any changes to agricultural management, but I've prepared detailed proposals for 3 tenant farms that could serve as test cases." Lady Margaret's eyes gleamed with something like approval. "Show me." Eliza retrieved her carefully organized notes and spread them across the table. The dowager studied them with the focused intensity of a general reviewing battle plans. "This is impressive," she said finally. "Far more thoughtful than anything my husband ever implemented. Has Nathaniel seen these?" "No, my lady. He's been occupied with other matters." "By which you mean he's been avoiding estate management entirely while hiding in London. Typical." Lady Margaret leaned back in her chair. "Tell me, what else have you been doing while my son plays the absent duke?" Eliza hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. But something in the dowager's expression, a combination of exasperation and genuine interest, made her decide to risk honesty. "I've been trying to repair the damage caused by years of neglect. The village was in terrible condition. The household staff were being worked to exhaustion. The estate systems were cruel and outdated," Lady Margaret finished. "Yes, I know. My husband believed in ruling through fear and deprivation. He thought generosity was weakness. Nathaniel inherited those systems and, wounded as he was, simply maintained them without thought." She paused. "But you've been changing things. How did you know?" "Because the servants are smiling, because the house feels alive again instead of like a mausoleum, because the village children I passed on my way here were playing near a new well that definitely wasn't there last time I visited." The dowager fixed Eliza with a penetrating stare. "You've been stirring up trouble, haven't you?" "I've been doing my duty as Duchess." You've been doing far more than that, and we both know it. My son undoubtedly disapproves. Strenuously, Eliza admitted. To her surprise, Lady Margaret laughed, a rich, genuine sound that transformed her stern features. Good. It's about time someone challenged him. He's been wrapped in his own misery for far too long. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Tell me everything. I want details. By the time they finished talking, the Dowager was regarding Eliza with something approaching admiration. You've accomplished more in 3 weeks than most duchesses manage in 3 years, Lady Margaret said. But you're going to face significant opposition, especially once you move beyond the estate. London society won't be as easy to win over as grateful tenant farmers. I don't care about London society's approval. Then you're a fool, the Dowager said bluntly. Like it or not, reputation matters. And right now, society is watching this marriage with great interest. They're waiting to see if you'll be another Elena or something entirely different. The comparison stung. I'm nothing like Elena. I know that. You know that. But society doesn't know that yet. And there are people in London who will be very interested in spreading rumors about the new Duchess of Ashford, particularly rumors that might damage my son's reputation. What kind of rumors? Lady Margaret's expression grew grim. You need to understand something about Nathaniel's position. He's not just a wealthy duke managing an estate. He's involved in matters of national security, work he inherited from his father and takes very seriously. There are people who would like to see him weakened or distracted. A scandal involving his new wife would serve that purpose admirably. Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of work? That's not for me to say, but understand this. Your husband's frequent trips to London aren't all about avoiding you, though I'm sure that's part of it. He's dealing with threats you can't imagine, and he's doing it alone because he doesn't trust anyone after Elena's betrayal. Lady Margaret stood, preparing to leave. You're strong, intelligent, and apparently fearless. All good qualities, but you'll need more than that to survive what's coming. And what exactly is coming? London society, child. The season begins in 6 weeks, and every ambitious mama, jealous rival, and scandal-hungry gossip will be watching the new Duchess of Ashford like hawks circling prey. You'll need to be perfect. Not just good, perfect. One misstep, one hint of impropriety, and they'll destroy you. After Lady Margaret departed to settle into her rooms, Eliza sat alone in the drawing room, her mind racing. She'd been so focused on the estate, on proving her worth through practical improvements, that she hadn't fully considered the political dimensions of her position. She was the Duchess of Ashford now. That meant more than just managing households and helping villages. It meant representing one of England's oldest and most powerful families in the cutthroat world of London society. It meant every word she spoke, every action she took, every relationship she formed would be scrutinized and judged. And if Lady Margaret was right about Nathaniel being involved in dangerous work, it meant Eliza's behavior could have consequences far beyond her own reputation. She found Nathaniel still in his study, surrounded by papers. He looked up when she entered, his expression wary. Your mother is here, she said without preamble. I'm aware. Mrs. Holloway informed me. He set down his pen. What did she say to you? Many things, but mostly she explained that I'm woefully unprepared for London society and likely to be eaten alive when the season begins. Something that might have been amusement flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. She does have a talent for blunt assessment. She also suggested that your trips to London involve more than just estate business, that you're engaged in work of national importance. The amusement vanished instantly. She had no right to tell you that. So it's true. Eliza moved closer to his desk. You're involved in something dangerous? That's not your concern. Of course it is. I'm your wife. If you're in danger, if there are people who might try to use me against you, don't I have a right to know? Nathaniel stood, his face closing down into that familiar cold mask. The less you know, the safer you are. I'm not a child who needs protection from difficult truths. You're also not... He stopped himself, but not before she heard what he'd left unspoken. You're also not Elena. The ghost of his first wife hung between them like smoke. Eliza felt frustration boiling over into anger. I need to know what I'm walking into, she said tightly. If I'm going to represent this family in London, if I'm going to be subjected to scrutiny and judgment, The least you can do is tell me what dangers I should actually be watching for. You should be watching for every danger, Nathaniel said harshly. Every smile that seems too friendly, every compliment that feels calculated, every social connection that appears coincidental. Trust no one, confide in no one, and for the love of... He cut himself off again. Just be careful. That's not helpful. It's the best I can offer. He turned away, staring out the window at the ground she'd worked so hard to restore. My father spent 30 years gathering intelligence for the crown. Information about France, about Napoleon's remaining networks, about threats to British trade and security. When he died, I inherited that work along with the title. It's dangerous, secretive, and absolutely necessary. And it's also the reason Elena's betrayal nearly destroyed everything. Eliza's breath caught. She was feeding information to your enemies. We never proved it conclusively, but yes, I believe she was passing details of my father's network to French agents through her lover. When she died, the leaks stopped. His voice was utterly emotionless, but his hands were clenched white-knuckled on the windowsill. So forgive me if I'm not eager to trust my new wife with sensitive information. I've learned that lesson already. The pain beneath his words cut through Eliza's anger like a blade. She wanted to touch him, to offer comfort, to tell him that she would never betray him as Elena had. But she knew he wouldn't believe her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Then tell me what I can do, she said quietly. Tell me how to help, how to represent you properly in London, how to protect what you're trying to accomplish. Don't shut me out and then expect me to somehow navigate blindly through whatever dangers you won't name. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. When he finally turned back to her, his expression was unreadable. Be perfect, he said. Be so gracious, so intelligent, so unimpeachably proper that no one can find a single weakness to exploit. Be the Duchess society expects, charming but not flirtatious, intelligent but not threatening, compassionate but not naive. Make them love you while giving them nothing they can use against us. That's an impossible standard. Yes, he agreed, but it's the one you'll be held to regardless. Welcome to the life of a duchess, Eliza. It's every bit as brutal as any battlefield, and far more subtle. The next 6 weeks were a crucible of preparation. Lady Margaret took personal charge of transforming Eliza from a capable estate manager into a social weapon sharp enough to cut through London's defenses. Every morning began with etiquette review, not the basic manners Eliza already knew, but the subtle, intricate dance of aristocratic social interaction. How to smile at someone while subtly cutting them. How to deliver a compliment that was actually an insult. How to navigate the complex hierarchies of precedence and favor. How to identify allies, rivals, and potential threats within seconds of entering a room. Remember, Lady Margaret would say, society is warfare conducted with teacups and calling cards. You must learn to fight. In the afternoons, they worked on Eliza's presentation. Her wardrobe was completely rebuilt by a seamstress from London who arrived with trunks full of fabrics and fashion plates. Her hair was styled in the latest modes. She learned to walk with a duchess's confidence, to speak with perfect diction, to project authority without arrogance. But the evenings were the hardest. That was when Lady Margaret invited local gentry families to small dinner parties designed to test Eliza's skills in controlled conditions. The dowager would watch like a hawk, noting every misstep, every awkward pause, every social error. Afterward, she would deliver brutally honest assessments. You let Mrs. Thornbury monopolize the conversation for 15 minutes. A good hostess redirects without giving offense. You laugh too loudly at Sir Robert's joke. Genuine amusement is fine. Boisterous laughter suggests a lack of refinement. You mentioned your work in the village 3 times. Society doesn't want to hear about tenant cottages at dinner parties. They want to feel that you're one of them, privileged, insulated, and certainly not getting your hands dirty with manual labor. That last criticism stung more than the others. So I'm supposed to pretend I don't care about the people who depend on us? You're supposed to be strategic about when and how you reveal that you care, Lady Margaret corrected. Charity work is acceptable, even expected, if framed properly. You're being compassionate, fulfilling your noble obligations. But you cannot appear so passionate about reform that you seem radical or dangerous. The aristocracy fears change almost as much as they fear revolution. Nathaniel largely avoided these preparations, spending most of his time locked in his study or absent entirely on mysterious trips to London. But occasionally, Eliza would catch him watching from doorways during her etiquette lessons, his expression unreadable. One evening, after a particularly grueling dinner party where she'd successfully navigated 3 potential social disasters, she found him in the library. "You're improving," he said without looking up from his book. "Your mother is a demanding teacher. She's preparing you for battle. London society will be far more vicious than country gentry." Eliza poured herself a small glass of sherry, another skill Lady Margaret had insisted she master, the ability to drink socially without overindulging. "Will you be attending the season with me?" "When I can. My work requires—" "Your work requires you to be absent. Yes, I understand." She couldn't quite keep the bitterness from her voice. "It must be convenient, having a wife who can represent you while you pursue whatever mysterious activities keep you perpetually unavailable." Nathaniel set down his book, his jaw tight. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Then tell me. Explain it to me. Or is that still too dangerous? Am I still too untrustworthy?" "It's not about trust. It's entirely about trust." The words burst out before she could stop them. "You won't share your work. You won't share your bed. You won't share anything that might require actual vulnerability. You want me to be the perfect Duchess, to represent your family flawlessly, to care for your estates and tenants, but you won't let me actually be your partner in any meaningful way." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Eliza laughed bitterly. "Nothing about this is fair. I've done everything you asked. I've transformed this estate. I've learned your mother's lessons. I'm preparing to face London society like it's a military campaign, and you still look at me like I'm a stranger you're forced to tolerate rather than the woman you married." Nathaniel stood, his face flushed with anger. "What exactly do you want from me, Eliza?" "I want you to try." She was close to shouting now, months of frustration boiling over. "I want you to make even the smallest effort to build something real between us instead of hiding behind your walls and your pain and your dead wife's betrayal." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Nathaniel's face went white, his eyes blazing with a fury so intense she instinctively stepped back. "Get out," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Nathaniel, get out of my library, now!" Eliza fled, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed until she reached her chambers. Inside, she finally let herself collapse against the door, shaking with emotion. She'd pushed too hard, gone too far. Mentioned the one thing she knew would wound him most deeply. All her careful progress, all the small victories she'd achieved on the estate, none of it mattered if she couldn't find a way to reach the man himself. A soft knock interrupted her spiral of self-recrimination. Mary entered, carrying a tea tray. "Mrs. Holloway thought you might need this, Your Grace," the maid said gently, setting down the tray and adding quietly, "The whole household heard the row. We're on your side, Your Grace. All of us." Eliza wiped her eyes, managing a watery smile. "Thank you, Mary, but I'm afraid I've made a terrible mess of things." "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but no. You're the first person who's ever stood up to His Grace like that. First person who's cared enough to try." Mary hesitated, then added, "Mr. Davies says His Grace has been different since you came. Less cold, more human, even when he's angry." After Mary left, Eliza sat by her window, sipping tea and staring out at the moonlit gardens. Somewhere in this vast house, Nathaniel was likely doing the same thing, sitting alone, nursing his wounds, reinforcing those walls she'd tried so desperately to breach. "This can't continue," she thought. "Something has to change, or we'll destroy each other trying to coexist." She didn't yet know that change was coming far sooner than she expected, and it would arrive in a form neither of them could have anticipated. The invitation arrived 3 days before they were scheduled to depart for London. Eliza was in the morning room reviewing household accounts when Mary brought it in, her eyes wide. "Your Grace, this just came. Special messenger from London. It's from the Prince Regent himself." Eliza's hands trembled slightly as she broke the royal seal. The invitation was written in elaborate script on heavy cream paper. "His Royal Highness cordially invites the Duke and Duchess of Ashford to a private reception at Carlton House, celebrating the formation of the new cabinet. April 15th, 1802. Evening attire required. This wasn't just an invitation to a social event. This was a summons to the highest levels of political power, a direct command from the future king himself. Refusing would be unthinkable. Attending would throw Eliza directly into the most elite, most dangerous social waters in England, weeks earlier than planned. She found Nathaniel in his study, showing him the invitation without comment. He read it twice, his expression growing darker with each word. This is earlier than expected. The season hasn't even officially started. Can we refuse? Absolutely not. This is clearly a test. Someone wants to see the new Duchess of Ashford in action before you've had time to fully prepare. He looked up at her, and for once, genuine concern showed in his eyes. Are you ready for this? Does it matter? We're going regardless. Eliza, I'll be fine. Your mother has trained me well. I'll smile and curtsy and say all the proper things, and I won't embarrass you. She heard the brittleness in her own voice and hated it. Nathaniel stood, moving around his desk until he was close enough that she could feel the heat of him. I don't doubt your abilities. I'm concerned about... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. There are people at court who are very good at finding weaknesses and exploiting them. They'll test you in ways my mother can't prepare you for. Then perhaps you should be there to support me instead of disappearing into corners with your mysterious associates, Eliza said sharply. I'll be there, he said quietly. The entire evening. I won't leave your side. The promise was so unexpected that Eliza didn't know how to respond. They stared at each other, the air between them charged with all the things neither could say. Finally, she nodded. Then I suppose we'll face it together, for once. 3 days later, they departed for London in the Ashford traveling coach. Lady Margaret accompanied them, her presence both comforting and nerve-wracking. The Dowager spent the entire 6-hour journey drilling Eliza on the names, relationships, and political allegiances of everyone likely to attend the Prince Regent's reception. Lord Pemberton, powerful, dangerous, and utterly ruthless. He's loyal to the crown but considers most people beneath his notice. Lady Pemberton, beautiful, ambitious, and notorious for her affairs. Don't let her charm you. She collects secrets the way other women collect jewelry. Lady Catherine Blackwood, young widow, extraordinarily wealthy, connected to half the noble families in England. She's been angling for a titled husband and will view you as competition, even though you're already married. Sir James Whitmore, war hero, member of Parliament, and one of the Prince Regent's closest advisors. He's genuinely decent, one of the few truly good men you'll meet in London. His wife died years ago, and he's devoted himself to his work since then. The list went on until Eliza's head spun with names and faces and complicated political allegiances. When they finally arrived at the Ashford townhouse in Mayfair, she was exhausted before the real challenge had even begun. The house was smaller than Ashford Hall, but no less elegant. 4 stories of pale stone with a columned entrance and windows that overlooked a private square. The London staff greeted them with careful formality, their eyes constantly flickering to Eliza with obvious curiosity. They're wondering what kind of duchess I'll be, she realized, wondering if I'll be weak like Elena or strong enough to survive this world. She had exactly 8 hours to prepare before they were due at Carlton House. Lady Margaret commandeered an army of servants, ladies' maids, hairdressers, a woman who specialized in cosmetics, and another who dealt exclusively with jewelry selection. Eliza was bathed, perfumed, dressed, and decorated until she barely recognized herself in the mirror. The gown was a masterpiece of champagne-colored silk that clung to her figure before falling in elegant folds to the floor. Diamonds, Ashford family diamonds that probably cost more than most London townhouses, glittered at her throat and ears. Her hair had been arranged in intricate curls that framed her face while emphasizing her long neck and elegant shoulders. "You look like a duchess," Lady Margaret said with satisfaction. "More importantly, you look like someone who belongs in the most exclusive drawing rooms in England. Remember everything I've taught you. Trust no one, reveal nothing, and whatever you do, don't let them see you afraid." When Eliza descended the stairs to meet Nathaniel in the entrance hall, she heard his sharp intake of breath. He stood at the bottom of the staircase in formal evening attire, looking every inch the powerful duke he was. But his eyes widened as he watched her approach, and for the first time since their wedding, she saw genuine heat in his gaze. "You look..." He seemed to struggle for words. Extraordinary. Your mother chose well, Eliza said, fighting to keep her voice steady under that intense scrutiny. It's not the dress. The words were barely audible, but they sent electricity down her spine. He offered his arm, a formal gesture they'd performed countless times. But tonight, when her hand settled into the crook of his elbow, she felt his muscles tense beneath the fabric. He was as nervous as she was, she realized. Whatever awaited them at Carlton House had even the unflappable Duke of Ashford on edge. The carriage ride to the reception was tense and silent. Lady Margaret had remained behind, declaring that the young couple needed to face this particular trial alone. Eliza sat ramrod straight, trying to control her breathing, while Nathaniel stared out the window at the gas-lit streets of London rolling past. Eliza, he said suddenly, just as they turned onto Pall Mall and Carlton House came into view. Whatever happens tonight, stay close to me. If someone tries to separate us, if anyone suggests you might enjoy viewing the gardens or examining the paintings in a private gallery, refuse. She looked at him sharply. You think someone will try to compromise me? I think someone will try something. I don't yet know what. But this invitation was calculated, and I don't believe in coincidences. He finally met her gaze. You've proven yourself at Ashford Hall. Now you need to prove yourself here, where the stakes are far higher and the enemies far more subtle. Before she could respond, the carriage stopped. The door opened, revealing Carlton House in all its glittering magnificence, columns and porticos and windows blazing with light from 1,000 candles. Nathaniel stepped out first, then turned to help her down. His hand was warm and steady around hers. For just a moment, as they stood together at the base of the grand entrance, he squeezed her fingers gently. Remember, he said quietly, you're the Duchess of Ashford. You have every right to be here. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Then they ascended the stairs together, stepping into a world of power, privilege, and danger that would test everything Eliza had learned and reveal just how high the cost of being unforgettable could be. The reception hall of Carlton House was even more overwhelming than Eliza had imagined. Massive chandeliers cast golden light across walls hung with priceless tapestries and paintings. Lords and ladies glittered with jewels and expensive fabrics, their laughter and conversation creating a roar of sound that felt almost physical. Servants in royal livery moved through the crowds bearing silver trays of champagne and delicacies. And every single person, it seemed, turned to stare as the Duke and Duchess of Ashford were announced. Eliza felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing her, judging her, cataloging every detail of her appearance and demeanor. The conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. People leaning closer to their companions, whispering behind fans and gloved hands. She felt naked despite her elaborate gown, exposed in ways that had nothing to do with fabric or propriety. Then Nathaniel's hand pressed against the small of her back, a proprietary gesture that declared his support even as it guided her forward. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and channeled every lesson Lady Margaret had drilled into her. You belong here. You are a duchess. Act like it. They'd barely made it 10 feet into the room when a woman materialized in front of them as if she'd been waiting. She was perhaps 30, devastatingly beautiful, with dark hair and blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence and calculation. Her gown was cut daringly low, and she wore a fortune in sapphires that matched her eyes. "Nathaniel!" she exclaimed, as if encountering an old friend. "How wonderful to see you, and this must be your new bride." Eliza felt Nathaniel stiffen beside her, his hand tightening imperceptibly against her back. "Lady Blackwood, may I present my wife, Eliza, Duchess of Ashford. Eliza, this is Lady Catherine Blackwood." The young widow Lady Margaret had warned her about, extraordinarily wealthy, socially connected, and judging by the way she looked at Nathaniel, still very interested in becoming the next Duchess of Ashford, despite having missed that particular opportunity. "How delightful," Lady Catherine purred, her eyes never leaving Nathaniel's face. "You must tell me all about how you met. The whole city is simply dying to know. Such a sudden marriage and so very quiet. People can't help but wonder what inspired such haste." The implication was clear. Were you pregnant? Desperate. Some kind of scandal we haven't yet discovered? Eliza smiled with perfect politeness, channeling every ounce of aristocratic disdain she'd observed in Lady Margaret. "Our marriage was arranged by our families. as is traditional among people of quality. I'm surprised that would seem mysterious to someone as socially experienced as yourself, Lady Blackwood. It was a perfectly delivered cut, polite enough to be deniable, but sharp enough to draw blood. Lady Catherine's smile froze for just a fraction of a second before recovering. Of course. How silly of me. And you're from the Hartwell family. My father is Lord Hartwell of Suffolk. Ah, yes. Lady Catherine's tone suggested she'd never heard of them, though they both knew that was impossible. Well, I'm sure you'll find London society quite overwhelming after Suffolk. She turned back to Nathaniel. You simply must let me steal you away later for a private conversation. There are some matters regarding the charity committee that urgently require your input. I'm afraid I'm occupied entirely with my wife this evening, Nathaniel said coolly. Any committee matters can be addressed through proper channels. Lady Catherine's eyes flashed with annoyance before her smile brightened impossibly further. Of course. How devoted. Well, I'm sure we'll have many opportunities to become better acquainted, Your Grace. This last directed at Eliza with a gaze that promised future confrontations. As Lady Catherine glided away, Eliza released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. That was well done, Nathaniel murmured in her ear. She's been pursuing me for 2 years. You've just made an enemy, but you handled it perfectly. Your mother warned me about her. My mother is wise. His hand was still warm against her back. Unfortunately, she's only the first of many challenges tonight. Come, I see Sir James Whitmore approaching, and he at least is genuinely worth knowing. The rest of the evening became a blur of introductions, conversations, and careful social maneuvering. Eliza met politicians who assessed her like a tactical asset, society matrons who evaluated her like a threat, and aging lords who looked at her with undisguised lechery that made her skin crawl. Through it all, Nathaniel remained at her side, his presence both support and reminder that she was being constantly observed. She was dancing with a Lord Pemberton, the powerful, dangerous man Lady Margaret had warned about, when she saw them. Nathaniel stood near the windows, deep in conversation with an older gentleman she didn't recognize. But it wasn't her husband who caught her attention. It was the woman who approached them as Eliza watched, a striking blonde in her 30s wearing a gown of deep crimson that managed to be both elegant and provocative. The woman touched Nathaniel's arm with easy familiarity. He turned, and Eliza saw his expression transform into something she'd never seen before, genuine warmth. He smiled, actually smiled, as they spoke. The woman laughed at something he said, leaning closer in a way that suggested intimacy. That would be Lady Victoria Sterling, Lord Pemberton said quietly, noticing Eliza's fixed gaze. Beautiful widow, wealthy in her own right, and extraordinarily charming. She and your husband have been close friends for several years. Close friends. The phrase was carefully neutral, but the implication was clear. Eliza felt something cold and sharp lodge in her chest. How interesting, she managed to say. My husband never mentioned her. Didn't he? Pemberton's voice held amusement. Well, I'm sure there's nothing improper. Lady Sterling is the very picture of respectability. Still, they do seem remarkably comfortable with one another. The dance ended. Eliza curtsied mechanically and began making her way back to Nathaniel, her mind racing. This was the woman, the mysterious widow the rumors spoke of, the one Nathaniel spent time with in London while leaving his wife alone at Ashford Hall. As she approached, Lady Victoria noticed her and immediately stepped back, her expression shifting to one of pleasant welcome. You must be the new Duchess, she said warmly. How wonderful to finally meet you. Nathaniel has told me so much about you. Funny, Eliza heard herself say with perfect politeness. He's told me absolutely nothing about you. The silence that followed was excruciating. Lady Victoria's smile faltered. Nathaniel's face went carefully blank. Eliza felt her heart hammering but kept her expression serene. I apologize, Lady Victoria said finally. I assumed you knew of our friendship. Nathaniel and I have worked together on several charitable initiatives. Nothing more. Of course not, Eliza agreed, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. After all, my husband would never give me cause to doubt his devotion. Would you, Your Grace? She let the question hang in the air, a challenge and accusation wrapped in the language of wifely affection. Around them, conversations had stopped. People were watching with undisguised interest, a scandal unfolding in real time. Nathaniel's eyes blazed with warning, but he kept his voice controlled. Lady Sterling is indeed a colleague, nothing more. Eliza, we should what? Pretend this isn't happening? Pretend I haven't spent months alone while you've been in London with your colleagues? She knew she was making a scene, knew she was violating every rule Lady Margaret had taught her, but months of hurt and loneliness and humiliation came pouring out. Perhaps you should introduce us properly, husband. After all, she seems to know you far better than I do. Eliza, Nathaniel's voice was steel wrapped in silk. This is neither the time nor the place. Then when is the time? When will you stop hiding, stop lying, stop treating me like an inconvenient obligation while you— Enough! The single word cracked like a whip. Nathaniel gripped her elbow, not painfully, but firmly enough to cut through her spiraling emotions. We're leaving, now. He practically dragged her through the crowd toward the exit. Behind them, Eliza heard the explosion of whispers and gasps. She'd just created exactly the kind of scandal Lady Margaret had warned against. She'd humiliated herself, her husband, and the Ashford name in front of the most powerful people in England. And she found, in that moment, that she didn't care at all. The carriage ride back to the townhouse was silent as a tomb. Eliza sat rigid in her seat, staring out at the dark London streets, while Nathaniel sat across from her, his fury so palpable she could almost taste it in the air between them. They didn't speak until they were inside, until the front door closed behind them and the servants scattered like mice before a storm. Then Nathaniel turned on her with eyes blazing. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking, Eliza said, her voice shaking with equal parts anger and humiliation, that I'm tired of being made a fool, tired of watching you smile at other women while you barely look at me, tired of being the perfect, obedient Duchess while you live your life as if I don't exist. So you decided to create a public scandal? To embarrass yourself in this family in front of the most powerful people in England? He raked a hand through his hair, his careful composure finally cracking. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Yes. I finally stopped pretending that everything is fine, that this marriage is anything other than a prison where you're the warden and I'm the inmate. You're being dramatic, am I? Eliza advanced on him, too furious to care about propriety or consequences. Tell me about Lady Sterling. Tell me about all those evenings in London. Tell me why you can smile at her but look at me like I'm a burden you can barely tolerate. Lady Sterling is a colleague. Don't lie to me. The words tore out of her. Everyone in that ballroom knew something I didn't. They were all watching to see how the pathetic new Duchess would react when she discovered her husband's mistress, and I gave them exactly the show they wanted. Nathaniel's face went white. Victoria is not my mistress. Then what is she? She's— He stopped, his jaw working as if physically restraining the words. She's someone I work with, someone I trust. That's all you need to know. It's not enough. Eliza felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. I've done everything you asked. I've transformed your estate, learned your mother's lessons, prepared to face London society. I've made myself into the perfect Duchess, while you've given me nothing. Not your trust, not your time, not even basic honesty. So forgive me if I finally broke under the weight of it all. You think this is about honesty? You want honesty? Nathaniel moved closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Fine. Yes, I spend time with Victoria in London. Yes, we're close. And yes, she understands parts of my life that you never will. But she is not my lover. She never has been. She's my partner in work that could get us both killed if the wrong people discovered what we're doing. Eliza froze. What? You wanted the truth? Here it is. Victoria Sterling is an intelligence operative. She's been working with me for 3 years to uncover a network of traitors selling British naval secrets to enemy agents. The work is dangerous, illegal in ways that would horrify you, and absolutely necessary to protect this country. And I've kept you away from it because the last woman who knew my secrets used them to nearly destroy everything. The words hung between them like physical blows. Eliza struggled to process what he'd just revealed, not just the nature of his work, but the raw pain beneath his fury. Elena, she whispered. Elena. He turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. My beautiful, charming first wife, who I thought loved me, who listened to my father's secrets, who smiled and played the devoted Duchess, and who sold every piece of intelligence she gathered to French agents through her lover. She compromised operations, got good men killed, and nearly brought down my father's entire network before we discovered what she'd done. Nathaniel, she died before we could prove it conclusively, before we could determine how much damage she'd really caused. And I swore that I would never again trust anyone with information that could be weaponized against me or this country. He finally turned back to her, and his eyes were haunted. So yes, I kept you at a distance. Yes, I worked with Victoria instead because she's proven herself trustworthy through years of dangerous operations. And yes, I've been a terrible husband, but I did it to protect you, Eliza, to protect everything. The silence that followed was crushing. Eliza felt the anger draining out of her, replaced by something more complex, a mixture of sympathy, frustration, and a terrible understanding. You were protecting yourself, she said quietly. Not me. You were so terrified of being betrayed again that you never gave me a chance to prove I was different. You're right. The admission seemed to cost him something. I was protecting myself, but I was also protecting you, the work Victoria and I do. If the wrong people knew you were my wife, if they thought they could use you to get to me— He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. You have no idea the kind of men we're dealing with, men who would hurt you just to send me a message. Then why marry me at all? Why bring someone else into this dangerous life? Because I'm a duke, because I need an heir, because society and duty demanded it. He laughed bitterly. And because some small, foolish part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, I could have something normal. A wife who managed the estate, a family, a life that wasn't all secrets and danger. But I couldn't let you close enough for that, could I? I couldn't risk it. Eliza moved closer, her earlier fury transformed into something more like sorrow. So instead you've made us both miserable. You've trapped yourself in fear while pretending it's protection. And you've punished me for crimes Elena committed. I know. His voice was barely audible. I know, and I don't know how to stop. Every time I think about trusting you, about letting you in, I remember Elena's face when she died. She knew what she'd done. She knew the damage, the deaths, and she didn't care. She smiled at me with her last breath and said I deserved everything I got for being fool enough to love her. The raw pain in his words broke something inside Eliza. She reached out, hesitating only a moment before placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. I'm not her, she said firmly. I'm not Elena. I don't care about your money or your title. I didn't even want to marry you, remember? I was forced into this just as much as you were. But I've tried, Nathaniel. I've tried so hard to be worthy of you, to prove myself, to earn even a fraction of your respect, and you've shut me out at every turn. He covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and shaking slightly. You've exceeded every expectation. You've been extraordinary, and that terrifies me more than anything else. Why? Because it would hurt so much more if you betrayed me now. If I let myself care and then discovered you were just another beautiful lie. His eyes met hers, and she saw vulnerability there for the first time since their wedding. I'm not strong enough to survive that again. Then don't survive alone. Eliza moved closer, close enough that she could feel his breath on her face. Let me help. Let me be your partner instead of your prisoner. Trust me with the truth, and I swear on everything I hold sacred that I will never betray you. For a long moment, Nathaniel stared at her, his eyes searching her face as if trying to read her very soul. Then slowly, he lowered his head until his forehead rested against hers. I want to believe you, he whispered. You have no idea how much I want to believe you. Then believe me. Take a chance. Let me prove— A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Nathaniel pulled back instantly, his expression closing down into careful neutrality. Enter. The butler appeared, his face pale. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. There's a man here who insists he must speak with you immediately. He says it's a matter of national urgency. Nathaniel and Eliza exchanged glances. Send him to my study. I'll be there momentarily. After the butler left, Nathaniel turned back to Eliza. This conversation isn't over, but I need to handle your mysterious business. I understand. She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice and failed. Will you at least tell me what's happening? He hesitated, clearly torn. Then to her surprise, he nodded. Wait here. Give me 10 minutes, and if what I learn is something you need to know, I'll tell you. That's the best I can offer right now. It was a small concession, but it was more than she'd gotten in months. Eliza nodded, and Nathaniel disappeared toward his study. She waited in the drawing room, her mind spinning with everything he'd revealed. Intelligence work, traitors, Elena's betrayal going far deeper than simple adultery. The danger that surrounded him constantly, the weight he carried alone. No wonder he's built walls, she thought. No wonder he pushes everyone away. But understanding didn't ease the hurt, and it didn't change the fact that their marriage was still broken, still trapped in fear and mistrust that might never heal. She was still lost in thought when Nathaniel reappeared 15 minutes later. His face was grim, his earlier vulnerability replaced by cold determination. Get dressed, he said without preamble. Something warm and dark. We're leaving in 10 minutes. What? Why? Because the intelligence we've been gathering just bore fruit. We know where the traitors are meeting tonight, and we have one chance to catch them in the act. He paused. And because you're right, if you're going to be my wife in truth, you need to understand exactly what that means. Come with me tonight, and I'll show you everything. Eliza's heart leaped into her throat. You're inviting me to witness something dangerous and probably illegal. Yes. His eyes burned with intensity. You wanted trust? Partnership? This is what it looks like. But once you see it, once you know the truth, there's no going back. Are you certain that's what you want? Every rational part of Eliza's mind screamed at her to refuse, to stay safe in the drawing room, to maintain her ignorance and her innocence. But she'd been playing it safe her entire life. And where had it gotten her? Trapped in a marriage with a man who barely acknowledged her existence. I'm certain, she said firmly. Give me 5 minutes to change. 10 minutes later, she met Nathaniel in the entrance hall wearing a dark blue wool dress and a heavy cloak. He'd changed into dark clothing as well, looking more like a highwayman than a duke. A closed carriage waited outside, unmarked and unremarkable. They rode in tense silence through London's increasingly rough streets, leaving the elegant neighborhoods of Mayfair behind for areas where the gas lamps grew sparse and the buildings crouched together like criminals plotting mischief. Finally, the carriage stopped in a narrow alley near the docks. Stay close to me, Nathaniel said as they disembarked. Don't speak unless absolutely necessary. And if something goes wrong, if I tell you to run, you run without question. Understood? Eliza nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. They moved through the shadows like ghosts, Nathaniel guiding her with a hand on her elbow. The smell of the Thames, fish and sewage and tar, filled her nose. In the distance, she heard rough laughter and breaking glass. A figure emerged from a doorway, causing Eliza to gasp. But Nathaniel just nodded in recognition. Victoria. Lady Sterling stepped fully into the dim light, now wearing men's clothing and a dark cap that hid her distinctive blonde hair. She looked nothing like the elegant society lady from the ball, and everything like the dangerous operative Nathaniel had described. You brought her? Victoria's voice was sharp with disapproval. Nathaniel, we discussed this. She's my wife. She has a right to know. Nathaniel's tone brooked no argument. What's the situation? Victoria's jaw tightened, but she responded professionally. They're inside, all three of them. Captain Reeves from the Admiralty, his clerk Hendricks, and their French contact, a man calling himself Dubois. They're examining documents right now, probably preparing for the exchange. How long do we have? 10 minutes at most. Then Dubois leaves by boat, and we lose our chance to identify the entire network. Victoria glanced at Eliza, her expression unreadable. Are you sure about this? No, Nathaniel admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. Position? Garrett and Thomas are covering the back exit. I'll take the side window. You go through the front. And her? She jerked her chin toward Eliza. She stays with me. They moved into position with military precision. Eliza's heart hammered so hard she was certain everyone within 100 yards could hear it. This was madness. Complete madness. She was a duchess, not a spy, and she had no business being here. But when Nathaniel looked back at her, when their eyes met in the darkness, she saw something that kept her rooted in place, Trust. Fragile, tentative, barely formed. But there. He was trusting her with this. Finally trusting her with something real. Nathaniel counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. He kicked open the door with explosive force, and everything happened at once. The room inside was sparse, a warehouse office with a desk, 3 chairs, and shocked men jumping to their feet. Eliza glimpsed papers scattered across the desk, documents bearing official seals. Then Nathaniel was moving, shouting orders, and Victoria burst through the side window in a shower of breaking glass. One of the men, a naval officer in uniform, lunged for the documents. Victoria tackled him with brutal efficiency, and they went down in a tangle of limbs. The clerk scrambled for the back door but ran straight into 2 more men who appeared from the shadows. But the third man, Dubois, the French contact, grabbed something from his coat and pointed it directly at Nathaniel. A pistol. Time seemed to slow. Eliza saw the weapon, saw the man's finger tightening on the trigger, saw Nathaniel turning but not fast enough. She didn't think. She just moved. Grabbing a heavy ledger from a nearby shelf, she hurled it with all her strength. It struck Dubois' arm just as the pistol fired. The shot went wild, the ball burying itself in the wall inches from Nathaniel's head. Nathaniel spun, his own weapon appearing in his hand with frightening speed. "Don't move, any of you." The room froze. Victoria had the naval officer pinned and disarmed. The clerk was restrained by Nathaniel's associates. And Dubois stood with his hands raised, his dropped pistol lying useless on the floor. But his eyes were fixed on Eliza with deadly focus. "The Duchess," he said in accented English, his voice carrying a note of dark amusement. "How unexpected. Tell me, does your wife know the full extent of your activities, Duke Ashford? Does she know about the men you've killed in service to the crown?" "Be silent," Nathaniel snapped. "Why? She's here, isn't she? She may as well know the truth." Dubois smiled, showing too many teeth. "Your husband is no gentleman spy playing at games, Your Grace. He's an assassin. He's killed 7 of my associates over the past 3 years. Shot 2 of them himself. Had others dealt with. He has blood on his hands, and now you do too." Eliza felt the room tilt. She looked at Nathaniel, searching his face for denial, for explanation, but his expression was stone. "Is it true?" she whispered. "Eliza. Is it true?" Nathaniel's silence was answer enough. Before anyone could speak, the door exploded inward again. Men in dark clothing poured into the room, not Nathaniel's allies, but others carrying weapons and moving with deadly purpose. "Move!" Victoria screamed, grabbing Eliza and hauling her toward the broken window. Gunfire erupted, deafeningly loud in the confined space. Eliza felt Victoria shove her through the window frame, felt glass cutting her hands as she tumbled into the alley beyond. Behind her, chaos. Shouts, more gunfire, the sound of fighting. Victoria landed beside her, already pulling her to her feet. "Run, now!" They ran blindly through the maze of alleys, Victoria leading while Eliza struggled to keep up. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit, heavy boots, harsh voices calling orders in French. "Nathaniel," Eliza gasped. "He can handle himself. We need to get you to safety before—" A figure stepped from the shadows ahead, blocking their path. Another behind. They were surrounded. Victoria drew a knife from somewhere, her stance shifting into something coiled and lethal. "Stay behind me." But then a voice cut through the darkness. "Lower your weapon, Lady Sterling. We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to talk." The man who emerged into the thin light was older, perhaps 50, with a military bearing and cold eyes that assessed them both with calculating intelligence. He wore the clothing of a gentleman, but his companions were clearly hired muscle. "Lord Pemberton," Victoria said flatly. "I should have known." Eliza's blood ran cold. Pemberton, the powerful lord she danced with at the ball. The man Lady Margaret had called dangerous and ruthless. "You're working with the French?" Eliza heard herself ask, her voice shaking. "Working with?" Pemberton laughed. "Dear child, I'm not working with anyone. I'm selling information to the highest bidder, as any sensible businessman would. The French pay well. So do the Russians, the Spanish, and anyone else interested in British naval movements." He turned his attention to Victoria. You and Ashford have been quite the nuisance, but tonight's unfortunate incident presents an opportunity. What opportunity? Victoria's hand tightened on her knife. The opportunity to be rid of you both. A tragic accident. The Duke's wife and his alleged mistress killed together during a sordid affair gone wrong. Very scandalous. Very convenient. He smiled at Eliza. Nothing personal, Your Grace, but you're remarkably inconvenient right now, and your husband is about to learn a valuable lesson about the cost of interference. Eliza's mind raced. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. She was going to die in a filthy London alley, killed by a traitor wearing the face of a gentleman. And Nathaniel would believe she'd been meeting Victoria secretly, would believe the worst of her, just as he'd believed the worst of Elena. Unless she fought back. You're wrong about one thing, Eliza said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror coursing through her. Nathaniel doesn't just interfere. He wins. He's taken down 7 of your associates, and he's going to take you down too. Brave words from a woman about to... The explosion of gunfire cut him off, but this time it came from behind Pemberton's men. They spun, weapons raising, just as Nathaniel emerged from the shadows with 2 of his own operatives. What followed was brutal and efficient. Nathaniel moved like violence incarnate, his earlier aristocratic elegance replaced by something dark and deadly. He shot one of Pemberton's men, disarmed another, and had the third on the ground before Eliza could fully process what was happening. Pemberton himself tried to run, but Victoria was faster. She tackled him with vicious precision, her knife pressed against his throat before he could take 3 steps. Game over, she said coldly. Within minutes, it was finished. Pemberton and his surviving men were restrained, and Nathaniel's operatives were securing the area. Nathaniel himself strode directly to Eliza, his hands gripping her shoulders as he searched her face with desperate intensity. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I'm fine. Nathaniel, I'm fine. But she was shaking badly now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with bruising force. When I saw them surrounding you, when I thought... His voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never should have brought you here, never should have exposed you to this. You didn't have a choice. Pemberton would have come after me eventually anyway, wouldn't he? Once he realized I was more than just a convenient duchess. Nathaniel pulled back enough to look at her, and his eyes were raw with emotion. You saved my life tonight. When Dubois aimed at me, you didn't hesitate. You didn't freeze. You just acted. So did you. You came after me. Always. The word was a vow. I will always come after you. I should have realized that sooner, should have trusted you sooner, should have... Your Grace. One of his operatives approached carefully. We need to move. The authorities will arrive soon, and explaining this situation will be complicated. Nathaniel nodded, his jaw tightening. Get Pemberton and the others to the safe house. Send word to Lord Castlereagh. And Victoria... I'll handle the cleanup, Victoria said quietly. She met Eliza's eyes, and something like respect flickered there. You're braver than I gave you credit for, Your Grace. And for what it's worth, your husband has been utterly miserable since he married you. Whatever you think happened between us, you're wrong. His heart was never mine. It just took him until tonight to realize who it actually belonged to. Before Eliza could respond, Victoria melted back into the shadows with the efficiency of a professional ghost. The journey back to the townhouse passed in a blur. Nathaniel held Eliza's hand the entire way, his grip tight enough to hurt, but she didn't complain. They were both covered in dirt and blood, though thankfully none of it Eliza's, and they probably looked like they'd been in a street brawl, which she supposed they essentially had. Inside, Nathaniel dismissed the shocked servants with terse orders and led Eliza directly to his study. He poured them both generous glasses of brandy, thrust one into her trembling hands, and drained his own in a single swallow. I've been going about this all wrong, he said abruptly. From the very beginning, I've been treating you like a problem to be managed instead of a partner to be valued, and tonight you proved beyond any doubt that I'm a fool. Nathaniel, let me finish, please. He set down his glass and moved to stand directly in front of her. Elena's betrayal broke something in me. Made me believe that trust was weakness, that love was a weapon. that the only way to stay safe was to stay distant. But all I've done is create exactly the kind of misery and isolation that makes life not worth living. He took her free hand, holding it carefully, as if it were something precious and fragile. You're brilliant, courageous, and far stronger than I ever gave you credit for. You've transformed my estate, won over people who haven't smiled in years, and tonight you saved my life without hesitation. And I've repaid all of that by treating you like you're invisible. You were afraid, Eliza said softly. I understand that now. Fear is no excuse for cruelty, and I have been cruel, even if I told myself I was being protective. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her scraped knuckles. I'm asking you, begging you, for a chance to start over, to build the partnership you spoke of, to trust you with everything, including the parts of myself I've kept locked away since Elena died. Eliza felt tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I want that. I've wanted that since the moment we married. But Nathaniel, I need to know what Dubois said about you killing people. Was he telling the truth? Nathaniel didn't look away, didn't try to soften it. Yes, I've killed 7 men over the past 3 years. All of them were traitors actively working to undermine British security. All of them had already caused the deaths of innocent people. And I would do it again without hesitation to protect this country. He paused. Does that horrify you? Eliza thought about her answer carefully. She thought about the comfortable, sheltered life she'd led before becoming Duchess. About all the ways she'd been naive about how the world actually worked. About the harsh reality that sometimes terrible choices were necessary to prevent even worse outcomes. It should probably horrify me, she admitted. But it doesn't. What horrifies me is the thought of traitors like Pemberton selling information that gets British sailors killed. What horrifies me is thinking about the damage Elena caused before she died. What horrifies me is the idea that you've been carrying this burden alone, without anyone to share it with or support you. Eliza, I'm not finished. She set down her brandy and took both his hands in hers. I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to be some idealized version of a gentleman who's never done anything morally complicated. I need you to be honest with me, to let me stand beside you instead of hiding me away for my own supposed protection. Can you do that? I can try. I want to try. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers in an echo of their earlier moment. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Eliza agreed, and felt him huff a surprised laugh. But you're stuck with me regardless. For better or worse, remember? For better or worse, he repeated. Then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was nothing like their cold wedding kiss. This was heat and desperation and months of denied need finally finding release. Eliza melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as his arms banded around her waist. They kissed like drowning people finding air, like enemies finding peace, like strangers finally recognizing each other as something more. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel's eyes were dark with desire and something deeper, something that looked dangerously close to love. Come to bed with me, he said, his voice rough. Not out of duty or obligation. Come to bed with me because you want to, because we're choosing this, choosing each other freely. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment everything truly changed, the moment their marriage of convenience transformed into something real. Yes, she whispered. Yes. He kissed her again, deeper this time, then swept her up into his arms with surprising strength. She laughed against his mouth, feeling lighter than she had in months despite everything that had happened tonight. They were halfway up the stairs when a tremendous crash echoed through the house. Nathaniel froze, his arms tightening protectively around Eliza. Below them, the front door hung open, swinging on its hinges. Men poured into the entrance hall, rough-looking men with weapons drawn and murder in their eyes. And at their center, being dragged forward with a bloody gash across her temple, was Lady Margaret. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace," said a voice from the doorway. A man stepped forward, his face obscured by shadows. "But you have something that belongs to my employer, and we're here to collect, along with your lovely Duchess and dear mother. Consider them our insurance policy." Nathaniel set Eliza down with careful precision, his body shifting to place himself between her and the intruders. His hand moved to his coat where she knew he kept a concealed weapon, but the man in the doorway tisked softly. "I wouldn't, Your Grace. My men have very quick trigger fingers, and your mother's skull is remarkably fragile. One wrong move and we'll discover just how fragile." Lady Margaret's eyes blazed with fury, despite the blood trickling down her face. "Nathaniel, don't you dare!" The man holding her cuffed her hard across the mouth, and Eliza felt rage explode through her chest. But Nathaniel's hand shot out, gripping her wrist in warning. His face was utterly calm, but she could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a forge. "What do you want?" Nathaniel asked, his voice dangerously soft. The man in the doorway stepped fully into the gaslight, and Eliza's blood ran cold. She recognized him, one of Pemberton's associates from the warehouse, a weaselly clerk who'd been taking notes during what must have been previous meetings. He'd escaped in the chaos. "What I want," the clerk said with oily satisfaction, "is for you to release Lord Pemberton immediately, along with Captain Reeves and all the others you so rudely detained tonight. You'll also provide us with a list of every operative in your intelligence network, every safe house location, and every piece of evidence you've gathered against our organization." "That's quite a list," Nathaniel observed coolly. "And in exchange?" "In exchange, we don't kill your mother and your lovely new bride. We don't burn this house to the ground. And we don't expose your illegal activities to the Crown, the public, and every newspaper in London. Imagine the scandal, the Duke of Ashford operating as a vigilante assassin, conducting unauthorized intelligence operations, killing British citizens without trial." "British traitors," Nathaniel corrected. "There's a distinction. Not one the public will care about when they learn you've been playing at spy games while claiming to be a respectable peer of the realm." The clerk smiled. "You have 10 seconds to decide. Your network and your prisoners or your family. Choose." Eliza felt her mind racing. There had to be a way out. There had to be something they could do. But Nathaniel's operatives were elsewhere, securing Pemberton and the other prisoners. The servants were probably cowering in their quarters, terrified of the armed men who'd invaded their home. It was just the two of them against at least 8 armed intruders. Impossible odds. Unless— "Wait," Eliza heard herself say, stepping out from behind Nathaniel before he could stop her. "Before my husband makes any decisions, perhaps we should clarify exactly what leverage you think you have." The clerk's eyes narrowed. "I have his mother, Your Grace. Isn't that clear enough?" "Oh, that's clear. What's not clear is whether you understand who you're actually threatening." Eliza moved down the stairs with careful, measured steps, channeling every ounce of aristocratic authority Lady Margaret had drilled into her. "You see, Lady Margaret isn't just Nathaniel's mother. She's the sister of the Earl of Pembroke, the aunt of 3 members of Parliament, and the godmother of the Prince Regent's favorite nephew. Killing her wouldn't just be murder, it would be a declaration of war against half the noble families in England." "She's bluffing," one of the other men muttered. "Am I?" Eliza let her gaze sweep across them with withering disdain. "You're common criminals working for a traitor. Do you really think you can murder a dowager duchess in her own home and simply walk away? Every constable, every magistrate, every soldier in London would be hunting you within the hour. Your organization would be exposed not through my husband's efforts, but through the official investigation that would follow. You'd be hanged in Tyburn before the week was out." She saw uncertainty flicker across several faces. Good. She was getting through to them. The clerk's jaw tightened. "Then we'll take you instead. Killing a duchess might cause problems, but holding one for ransom? Your husband will pay any price to get you back." "Will he?" Eliza felt Nathaniel tense behind her, but forged ahead. "We've been married less than 3 months. We barely know each other. If you'd done your research properly, you'd know that society considers our marriage a cold, practical arrangement. My husband spends most of his time in London while I manage his country estates. We're strangers who happen to share a name." "Eliza?" Nathaniel's voice held warning. "It's true, isn't it?" She kept her eyes on the clerk, praying he wouldn't see through her calculated gamble. "A new wife you barely tolerate, or your entire intelligence network, and the safety of the realm. I know which one I'd choose." For a long moment the clerk stared at her, clearly trying to determine if she was telling the truth. Then his face twisted with frustration. Fine. We'll take them both. His mother and his wife. 2 hostages are better than 1. Are they? This time it was Nathaniel who spoke, moving to stand beside Eliza. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing with perfect naturalness. Because my wife just told you exactly why that won't work. You harm either of them, and you'll have the full weight of the British nobility and crown down on your heads. But there's another option. What option? You work for Pemberton, yes? A man who sells secrets for profit? Nathaniel's voice was silk over steel. What if I paid you more to walk away right now? What if I offered each of you enough money to disappear, to leave England entirely and start new lives where no one knows your names or your crimes? Eliza saw the shift immediately. These weren't ideological traitors fighting for France. They were hired men working for money, and Nathaniel had just offered them a fortune to betray their employer. How much? One of them asked, lowering his weapon slightly. 10,000 pounds per man, paid in gold tonight. Enough to buy passage to America or the continent and live comfortably for years. Nathaniel's tone was perfectly reasonable, as if he were discussing a simple business transaction. Or you can continue with this doomed plan, fail to extract what you came for, and end up dancing at the end of a rope when the authorities catch you. Your choice. The men exchanged glances. The clerk saw his control slipping and tried to reassert it. Don't listen to him. Lord Pemberton will have us killed if we— Lord Pemberton, Nathaniel interrupted coldly, is currently locked in an undisclosed location facing charges of high treason. He has no power to threaten anyone anymore. I, on the other hand, am offering you survival. Take the money and disappear, or stay and die. You have 5 seconds to decide. The tension stretched like a bowstring pulled to its limit. Eliza held her breath, her hand tight in Nathaniel's. This had to work. It had to. Then one of the men lowered his weapon completely. I'll take the gold. Coward, the clerk spat. Smart man, Nathaniel corrected. He looked at the others. Anyone else interested in living? Within seconds, 6 of the 8 men had lowered their weapons. Only the clerk and 1 loyalist remained committed to their original plan, and they were now outnumbered. You can't do this, the clerk said desperately. The organization will— The organization is finished, Eliza said firmly. My husband has spent 3 years dismantling it piece by piece. Tonight was the final blow. Lord Pemberton will be executed for treason. Captain Reeves will spend the rest of his life in prison. And you— She took a step toward him, her eyes hard. You have exactly 1 chance to save yourself. Take it. The clerk's face cycled through rage, desperation, and finally resignation. His weapon lowered. The gold. Now. Nathaniel nodded to the man holding Lady Margaret. Release her first. Lady Margaret was shoved forward roughly. She stumbled, but Eliza was there instantly, catching her and helping her to a chair. The dowager's hands were trembling, though her voice was steady when she spoke. That was the most terrifying and impressive thing I've ever witnessed. Well done, both of you. Nathaniel was already moving to his study, returning moments later with a locked strongbox. He opened it to reveal neat stacks of gold coins, clearly kept on hand for exactly this kind of emergency. With efficient precision, he divided the contents into 8 portions. The ports are being watched, he told them as they collected their shares with greedy hands. Your best chance is to head north to Liverpool or Bristol. Don't stop. Don't contact anyone from your former organization. And don't ever let me see your faces again, or this generous offer becomes a death sentence. Clear? They nodded, already backing toward the door. Within minutes, they were gone, vanished into London's dark streets with their blood money. The house fell silent except for the sound of Eliza's ragged breathing. She was shaking now, the adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation finally draining away. Nathaniel was beside her instantly, his arms wrapping around her in fierce support. That was incredibly reckless, he murmured into her hair, and absolutely brilliant. I learned from watching you negotiate your way out of impossible situations, Eliza managed. Besides, you were the one who thought to bribe them. After you bought us time by making them question their leverage. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes intense. You stood there facing armed men and turned the entire situation around through pure force of will and intelligence. You didn't freeze, you didn't panic, you fought. We fought. Eliza corrected. Together. Lady Margaret cleared her throat delicately. While I'm deeply appreciative of the rescue and rather impressed by your teamwork, I feel compelled to point out that we have 8 men running loose in London with knowledge of tonight's events. That seems problematic. Nathaniel's expression shifted into something darker. They won't get far. I have people watching every major road out of London and every port. By morning, they'll all be quietly detained and offered a different choice: permanent silence in exchange for their lives or execution for their crimes. I'm betting most will choose silence, and the ones who won't will disappear quietly. This work requires difficult choices, Mother. You know that. Lady Margaret sighed, dabbing at her bleeding temple with a handkerchief Eliza provided. I do know. I lived it for 30 years with your father. I just hoped— She stopped, her voice catching. I hoped you might build something different with Eliza. A partnership, yes, but not one so steeped in violence and danger. So did I, Nathaniel admitted quietly. But after tonight, I think violence and danger might be unavoidable, given the enemies we face. What matters is that we face them together. Eliza proved tonight that she's more than capable of handling this world. I proved I can think fast in a crisis, Eliza corrected. That doesn't mean I'm eager to make a habit of it, but— She took a deep breath. I also proved that I can be trusted, that I won't fall apart when things get dangerous, that I'm your partner in truth, not just in name. You did. Nathaniel raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. And I will never doubt that again. I swear it. The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door, this time preceded by a familiar voice calling out identification codes. Nathaniel's operatives had returned, bringing news that Pemberton and the other prisoners were secured, and that Victoria had already begun interrogating them for additional names and locations. Over the next hour, the townhouse became a hub of covert activity. Operatives came and went, reporting on pursuit of the bribed intruders, the status of the prisoners, and developments in the broader investigation. Through it all, Eliza sat beside Nathaniel in his study, listening as he coordinated the operation with calm efficiency. She was seeing her husband in an entirely new light, not the cold Duke who'd barely acknowledged her existence at Ashford Hall, not even the wounded man who'd revealed his pain earlier tonight. This was Nathaniel as a leader, decisive, strategic, and absolutely in control even amid chaos. And he kept her beside him through all of it. When decisions needed to be made, he consulted her. When information came in, he explained it. When his operatives looked at her with obvious skepticism, he made it clear that she was to be treated as his equal partner in all matters. It was nearly dawn when things finally quieted. Lady Margaret had been tended by a discreet physician and sent to bed with strict orders to rest. The last operative had departed with final instructions. And Eliza and Nathaniel were finally alone in his study, exhausted but somehow more connected than they'd ever been. I need to tell you everything, Nathaniel said, pouring them both wine. All of it. The full scope of the operation, the remaining threats, what we're still investigating. You've earned that right a dozen times over tonight. I'd like that. But Nathaniel— Eliza accepted the wine, but set it aside without drinking. I also need to tell you something about Ashford Hall and the changes I made while you were away. His eyebrows rose. I thought we'd addressed that already. You addressed the surface issues, the well repair, the cottage improvements, but there's more. She took a steadying breath. I suspended your steward not just because he was embezzling, which he was. I suspended him because I discovered he was also passing information about your activities to Lord Pemberton. Nathaniel went very still. Explain. I found letters in his office, encoded correspondence that I couldn't fully decipher, but the recipient's name was clear enough. Pemberton. They were discussing your travel schedules, your meetings in London, even your relationship with Lady Sterling. Your steward was spying on you and selling that intelligence to your enemies. Why didn't you tell me this immediately? Because I wasn't certain you'd believe me. Because I thought you'd assume I was making accusations to justify my own overreach in dismissing him. Because— She met his gaze directly. Because I wanted to handle it myself. I wanted to prove I could protect you and this estate without needing you to swoop in and save me. Nathaniel set down his own wine very carefully. Where are the letters now? Locked in my personal safe at Ashford Hall, along with the steward's account books showing the embezzlement and several other documents I thought might be relevant to your work. A slow smile spread across Nathaniel's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in months. You've been conducting your own investigation. I've been protecting what's mine, Eliza corrected. The estate, the people who depend on us, and yes, you, even though you didn't know you needed protecting. I told you I would never betray you, Nathaniel. I meant it. And I've been proving it through actions, not just words. He moved around the desk, pulling her up and into his arms. You're extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, and I've been a blind fool not to see it sooner. Yes, you have, Eliza agreed, but she was smiling now. Though to be fair, I was rather good at hiding my activities. I learned from watching you, after all. Clearly, I'm a better teacher than I realized. He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her mouth with a tenderness that made her chest ache. When this is over, when Pemberton and his network are completely dismantled, I want to go back to Ashford Hall. With you. I want to see everything you've built there. I want to meet the people you've helped, walk through the restored gardens, and actually be present in our home instead of treating it as somewhere to escape from. I'd like that. Though I should warn you, the villagers have rather strong opinions about you. You'll need to prove yourself to them just as much as I needed to prove myself to London society. Fair enough. Nathaniel's expression grew more serious. But there's something else I need to tell you first, about the intelligence operation and where we stand now. Over the next hour, he explained everything. The full scope of the French spy network that had been operating in England for years. How his father had discovered it and spent decades slowly mapping its connections. How Elena's betrayal had nearly destroyed all that work and led to the deaths of several British operatives. How Nathaniel had rebuilt the operation with Victoria's help, creating a shadow network of loyal agents dedicated to protecting British interests. Pemberton was the keystone, Nathaniel explained. He had connections to nearly every major trader in our network. With him captured and facing execution, the entire structure will collapse. But that also makes the next few weeks extremely dangerous. His remaining associates will be desperate, willing to take increasingly reckless actions to either free him or silence him before he can implicate others. Which means we're still in danger. Significant danger, yes. I can protect you here in London with my operatives close by. But Eliza, he took her hands. I need you to understand what you're choosing. If you stay beside me through this, if you continue to be my partner in this work, you'll be a target for the rest of your life. There will always be new threats, new enemies, new missions that require secrecy and deception. It's not a life I would wish on anyone, let alone someone I... He stopped himself, seeming to struggle with the words. Someone you what? Eliza prompted softly. Someone I'm beginning to care for more deeply than I ever thought possible. The admission came out rough, almost reluctant. Someone who deserves better than a husband who brings danger to her doorstep and asks her to smile through it all. Eliza felt warmth bloom in her chest. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was honest, and it was real, and it was more than she'd ever hoped for from this marriage. I don't need better, she said firmly. I need you. The real you, not some sanitized version designed to keep me safely ignorant. And I need a purpose that matters more than managing households and attending tea parties. You're offering me both. Why would I refuse? Because it's dangerous. Life is dangerous. Childbirth is dangerous. Society politics are dangerous in their own way. At least this danger comes with the satisfaction of knowing we're protecting innocent people and serving something larger than ourselves. She squeezed his hands. Besides, I'm rather good at this, aren't I? Tonight proved that. Tonight proved you're fearless to the point of insanity, Nathaniel said, but he was smiling. Very well. If you're certain, then we do this together. Full partnership. No more secrets. No more distance. From this moment forward, we face everything as equals. Everything? Everything, he confirmed. Then his expression shifted, heat entering his gaze. Including finally consummating this marriage of ours. If you're still willing. Eliza's breath caught. After everything that had happened tonight, the confrontation at Carlton House, the warehouse raid, the invasion of their home, desire seemed almost absurd. and yet she felt it coiling through her, urgent and undeniable. "I'm willing," she whispered. "Very willing." This time, when he swept her into his arms and carried her toward his chambers, no one interrupted them. The door closed behind them with solid finality, shutting out the world and its dangers and complications. What followed was tender and fierce by turns, a claiming and a surrender that blurred the lines between victory and vulnerability. Nathaniel touched her with reverent intensity, as if she were something precious he'd only just realized he possessed. Eliza met him with equal passion, finally expressing through touch what she couldn't yet say in words. When it was over, they lay tangled together in his massive bed, both breathing hard and wrapped in each other's arms. Nathaniel pressed kisses to her shoulder, her neck, her temple, each one feeling like a promise. "No regrets?" he murmured. "None whatsoever." Eliza traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palm. "Though I should probably feel scandalized that it took armed intruders and a near-death experience to get you into bed with me." He laughed, a genuine warm sound that transformed his entire face. "I've been a fool, but I intend to spend the rest of our lives making up for it." "I'll hold you to that." They stayed there as dawn broke over London, talking quietly about their plans. Nathaniel explained which of his operatives needed to be alerted about Eliza's new role as his partner. Eliza described the improvements she wanted to implement at Ashford Hall and her ideas for helping not just their own tenants, but surrounding estates as well. They talked about the future, about children eventually, about building something meaningful together, about transforming their marriage of duty into something neither had expected, but both desperately wanted. It was nearly noon when they finally emerged, rumpled and clearly exhausted, but also radiating a connection that the household staff noticed immediately. Mrs. Holloway actually smiled, an expression the stern housekeeper usually reserved for perfectly folded linens and properly cleaned silver. Lady Margaret was waiting for them in the breakfast room, looking considerably better despite the bandage on her temple. She took one look at them and raised her teacup in salute. "Well, it's about time. I was beginning to wonder if I'd need to lock you in a room together before you both came to your senses." "Mother," Nathaniel said with exaggerated patience, "we've been married for months. You've been strangers living under the same roof for months. Now you're actually married. There's a difference." She turned to Eliza with obvious approval. "You handled yourself brilliantly last night, both during the initial confrontation and during the invasion here. Nathaniel's father would have been impressed." "Thank you, my lady, though I was terrified the entire time. Fear is useful. It keeps you sharp. It's panic that kills." Lady Margaret set down her cup. "Now, I've been thinking about the social situation. The scandal from Carlton House needs to be addressed before it destroys your reputation entirely." Eliza winced. She'd almost forgotten about her public confrontation with Lady Sterling. "How bad is it?" "Catastrophic," Lady Margaret said bluntly. "By now, every drawing room in London is gossiping about how the new Duchess of Ashford accused her husband of infidelity in front of the Prince Regent himself. You're being painted as either a jealous shrew or a naive fool, depending on who's telling the story." "Wonderful," Eliza muttered. "However," the Dowager continued, "catastrophe can be turned to advantage with proper management. We simply need to control the narrative before someone else does it for us." Nathaniel leaned forward, his eyes sharpening with interest. "What do you propose?" "A carefully orchestrated appearance at Lady Rothwell's ball tomorrow night. You'll attend together, clearly devoted to each other, and you'll address the rumors head-on. Admit there was a misunderstanding at Carlton House. Blame it on the stress of the season and your newlywed status. Be charming, be united, and above all, be so obviously in love that everyone who sees you together will question whether the rumors were ever true at all." "Pretend to be in love," Eliza said carefully. Lady Margaret's eyes glinted. "Is it really pretending anymore, dear?" The question hung in the air. Eliza felt heat rising in her cheeks as she met Nathaniel's gaze. They hadn't spoken the words yet, hadn't quite dared to name what was growing between them. But after last night, after everything they'd shared, everything they'd survived together, could either of them deny what was becoming increasingly obvious? "No," Nathaniel said quietly, his eyes never leaving Eliza's face. "I don't think it's pretending at all." The admission sent electricity through the room. Lady Margaret smiled with deep satisfaction. Good. Then you'll have no trouble convincing society that you're devoted newlyweds who simply had a small public spat. These things happen. The key is to recover from it with grace. She stood, preparing to leave them to their breakfast. I'll make the necessary arrangements. You two just focus on being believable, which, given the way you're looking at each other right now, shouldn't be difficult at all. After she left, Nathaniel reached across the table to take Eliza's hand. She's right, you know, about what's happening between us. I know. Eliza interlaced their fingers. I'm not quite ready to say the words yet. After everything with Elena, after months of thinking you despised me, I never despised you. I was terrified of you. Same thing, emotionally. She smiled to soften the words. But I'm willing to try, to build towards something real, to see where this partnership takes us beyond just intelligence work and estate management. That's all I'm asking, a chance. He raised her hand to his lips. Though I should warn you, Lady Rothwell's ball will be brutal. Everyone will be watching for any sign of weakness or discord. We'll need to be perfectly synchronized. Then we'd better practice, Eliza said with a mischievous glint in her eye. Extensively, starting now. Nathaniel's answering grin was wicked. I like the way you think, wife. They spent the rest of that day, and the next, preparing for what Lady Margaret called their social redemption campaign. Victoria stopped by briefly to report that Pemberton was singing like a canary, providing names and locations faster than scribes could record them. The intelligence windfall was unprecedented, enough to dismantle French operations throughout England and potentially save thousands of lives. You did this, Victoria told them both, her usual cool demeanor warming slightly. Your work tonight broke open the entire network. The Crown will be grateful, even if they can never publicly acknowledge it. And you helped make it possible, Nathaniel replied. None of this works without your efforts, Victoria. I know. She smiled slightly. But it's nice to hear it acknowledged anyway. She turned to Eliza. And you, Your Grace. Welcome to the world of secrets and shadows. Try not to get killed. It would be terribly inconvenient for all of us. I'll do my best, Eliza promised. The night of Lady Rothwell's ball arrived with terrifying speed. Eliza dressed in a gown of deep emerald silk that made her eyes luminous and emphasized her figure in ways her previous dresses had not. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, Ashford family jewels that proclaimed her status unmistakably. But it was the way Nathaniel looked at her when she descended the stairs that gave her real confidence. His eyes darkened with desire and something deeper, and when he took her hand, his touch was possessive and tender at once. You're breathtaking, he murmured. They won't be able to look away. That's rather the point, isn't it? To make them see us as devoted newlyweds instead of the scandal they're expecting? Yes, but it's also the truth. He kissed her gloved hand. You are breathtaking, and I'm the luckiest man in England to call you mine. The ball was every bit as brutal as predicted. Conversations stopped when they entered. Fans snapped open to hide whispered comments. Eyes tracked their every movement with predatory interest. But Nathaniel never left her side. His hand remained at the small of her back, steady and warm. When they danced, they moved together with perfect synchronization, so close that scandalmongers whispered about impropriety even as they envied the obvious intimacy. And when Lady Sterling approached them, as everyone knew she eventually would, both Nathaniel and Eliza were ready. Your Grace, Victoria said with perfect politeness, curtsying to them both. I wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding at Carlton House. I should have been more mindful of appearances. There's nothing to apologize for, Eliza said graciously, following the script they'd rehearsed. I'm afraid I let the stress of the season affect my judgment. I hope you can forgive my rudeness. Of course, and I hope we might become friends, given our shared interest in charitable work. I would like that very much. The exchange was witnessed by dozens of influential people. Within an hour, the story spreading through the ballroom had shifted. The new Duchess had simply been overwhelmed and tired, had misunderstood an innocent friendship, and had gracefully apologized. How mature, how proper, how utterly devoted she and the Duke seemed to each other now. By the end of the evening, Lady Pemberton herself, one of the most influential hostesses in London, approached Eliza with a smile. "You've handled this beautifully, Your Grace, with grace and dignity. I confess I had my doubts about you when you first appeared, but you've proven yourself admirably. I should very much like to include you in my salon next week, if you're interested. We discuss literature, politics, and the arts. I think you'd find it stimulating." It was an olive branch, an acceptance, an acknowledgement that Eliza had passed society's brutal tests and emerged victorious. "I would be honored, Lady Pemberton. Thank you." In the carriage ride home, Eliza sagged against Nathaniel's shoulder with exhaustion and relief. "We did it," she murmured. "We actually did it." "You did it," he corrected. "You turned a devastating scandal into a triumph of social maneuvering. My mother would be proud. I certainly am. We're partners, remember? I couldn't have done it without you beside me." She looked up at him. "Literally beside me. You never wavered, never left me to face them alone. And I never will again." He kissed her softly. "Whatever comes next, and there will be challenges, I promise you that, we face it together, equal partners in everything." "Everything," Eliza agreed. When they arrived home, they found a message waiting from Victoria. Pemberton had been formally charged with high treason and would face trial within the month. The network was collapsing faster than anyone had anticipated. Dozens of arrests were expected within days. It was the beginning of the end for the threat that had haunted Nathaniel for years. And it was the beginning of something entirely new for him and Eliza. A marriage transformed from cold arrangement into genuine partnership, from duty into something that was starting to look remarkably like love. They stood in Nathaniel's study reviewing Victoria's message when the second letter arrived, this one sealed with the royal crest. Nathaniel's expression shifted from satisfaction to sharp concern as he broke the seal and read. "What is it?" Eliza asked, moving to his side. "A summons. The Prince Regent wishes to see us both tomorrow morning at Carlton House. Private audience." He set down the letter carefully. "This could be recognition for our work, or it could be something far more dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "The prince has been known to publicly reward those who serve the crown well, but he's also been known to distance himself from anything that might cause political complications. If he's decided our methods were too extreme, too illegal..." Nathaniel didn't finish the thought, but Eliza understood. They could be facing honors or accusations, gratitude or exile. "Then we face it together," she said firmly, "whatever comes." That night, they made love with an intensity born of uncertainty, clinging to each other as if the morning might tear them apart. Afterward, wrapped in Nathaniel's arms, Eliza found herself thinking about how far they'd come in such a short time, from strangers bound by duty to partners bound by something infinitely more precious. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered into the darkness, "I need you to know that I don't regret any of this. Not the danger, not the scandal, not even the terrible beginning, because it led us here." Nathaniel's arms tightened around her. "I love you." The words came out rough, almost reluctant, as if he were still fighting them even as he spoke. "I didn't want to, didn't plan to, but I do. I love you, Eliza, and if tomorrow brings consequences for what we've done, I need you to know that protecting you, building this partnership with you, it was worth any price." Tears burned behind Eliza's eyes. "I love you too. I think I started falling the moment you finally stopped hiding from me, when you let me see the real you, not the cold duke you pretended to be." They held each other through the night, neither sleeping much, both acutely aware that the life they'd begun building could be shattered by a royal decision. Morning came too soon. They dressed with care. Nathaniel in formal court attire, Eliza in a gown of pale blue silk with the Ashford diamonds at her throat. Lady Margaret joined them for the carriage ride to Carlton House, her expression grave. "Whatever happens in there," she told them both, "remember that you've done nothing wrong. You've protected this country at great personal cost. If the Prince Regent fails to recognize that, then he's a fool. But you'll survive his foolishness with your honor intact." Carlton House loomed before them, even more imposing in daylight. They were escorted through a bewildering maze of corridors to a private chamber where the Prince Regent waited with two other men Eliza didn't recognize. Your grace! The prince rose, his corpulent frame draped in elaborate clothing. Thank you for attending on such short notice. Allow me to introduce Lord Castlereagh, our Foreign Secretary, and Sir Henry Wellesley, who heads our intelligence operations. Nathaniel bowed deeply, and Eliza curtsied, her heart hammering. This was either very good or catastrophically bad. Your recent activities, Lord Castlereagh began without preamble, have caused considerable disruption. Lord Pemberton was a peer of the realm. Captain Reeves served with distinction in His Majesty's Navy. The arrests, the accusations of treason, these are serious matters that reflect on the entire aristocracy. Eliza felt ice forming in her stomach. This was condemnation, not praise. But Nathaniel stood straight, his voice steady. Lord Pemberton sold naval secrets that led directly to the deaths of at least 40 British sailors. Captain Reeves provided him with classified information in exchange for money. They were traitors, my lord, regardless of their titles or past service. Would you prefer we had allowed them to continue? We would prefer, Sir Henry said quietly, that you had reported your suspicions through proper channels rather than conducting unauthorized operations that could have caused an international incident. Proper channels were compromised, Nathaniel replied. My father spent 30 years building intelligence networks only to have them nearly destroyed by a traitor in his own household. I wasn't about to risk the same mistake by trusting bureaucracy over proven operatives. You mean Lady Sterling and her network of spies operating without official sanction? Castlereagh said. I mean patriots willing to do what's necessary to protect Britain, yes. The tension in the room was suffocating. Eliza found her voice, stepping forward slightly. If I may speak, Your Highness? The Prince Regent's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. Please, Your Grace. My husband has been conducting this work since before our marriage. I only became involved recently, so I have the perspective of someone outside the intelligence community. And what I've seen is this. While official channels debated and deliberated, Lord Pemberton was selling information that cost British lives. While committees met and reports were filed, French agents were mapping our naval movements and planning attacks. My husband didn't act outside proper channels because he wanted power or glory. He acted because people were dying, and someone needed to stop it. She took a breath, meeting the Prince Regent's gaze directly. You can condemn him for his methods. You can strip his titles, exile us, make examples of us to show that even dukes must follow proper procedures. But you cannot deny that what he did, what we did together, saved British lives and exposed traitors who would have continued their work for years if left unchecked. Silence fell. Lord Castlereagh and Sir Henry exchanged glances. The Prince Regent studied Eliza with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then, slowly, he smiled. Well said, Your Grace. Very well said indeed. He turned to Nathaniel. Your Duchess is quite formidable. I can see why you married her. I married her because duty demanded it, Nathaniel said quietly. But I fell in love with her because she's the bravest, most intelligent person I've ever met. And she's right about everything she just said. The Prince Regent laughed, the sound booming through the chamber. Sit, both of you, please. This posturing is exhausting, and we have much to discuss. They sat, though Eliza's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Nathaniel found them and squeezed gently. Here is the situation, Sir Henry began once they were settled. Lord Pemberton's trial will be held privately. He will be executed quietly, without public fanfare, on charges that will never be fully detailed. The official story will be that he was caught engaging in financial crimes, embezzlement, fraud, that sort of thing. Disgraceful, but not treasonous. You're covering it up, Nathaniel said flatly. We're managing it, Castlereagh corrected. A public trial for treason would expose gaps in our security that our enemies could exploit. It would cause panic among the nobility and potentially destabilize the government. Better to handle it quietly and ensure it never happens again. And what about the others? Captain Reeves, the clerks, all of Pemberton's network? Being dealt with as we speak. Some will be imprisoned. Others will be offered exile in exchange for their silence. A few, the most dangerous ones, will simply disappear. Sir Henry's expression was grim. This is the ugly business of protecting the realm, Your Grace. Not everything can be handled with honor and transparency. Eliza felt sick. These were the consequences she'd signed up for when she chose to stand beside Nathaniel, but hearing them spelled out so baldly was still shocking. "And us?" Nathaniel asked. "What happens to my wife and me?" The Prince Regent leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "That depends on what you want. We can offer you official positions within the intelligence service, legitimate roles with crown backing and proper authority. You would continue your work, but under official supervision and with the protection that comes from government sanction." "Or," Nathaniel prompted, "or you can walk away, return to your estates, live quietly, and never speak of any of this again. You would be free from the danger, the secrecy, the burden of this work. But you would also be forbidden from any further intelligence activities. No operations, no investigations, no contact with your current network. A clean break." It was an impossible choice, and they all knew it. Eliza looked at Nathaniel, seeing the conflict written across his face. This work had defined his life for years. It had cost him his first marriage, his peace of mind, any chance at normal happiness. But it had also given him purpose, had allowed him to serve his country in ways that truly mattered. "May we have a moment to discuss this?" Eliza asked. The prince nodded, and the three men withdrew to the far end of the chamber, giving them privacy. "What do you want?" Nathaniel asked quietly. "Not what you think I want, not what duty demands. What do you want, Eliza?" She thought about Ashford Hall, about the villages she'd been helping, about the life they could build there far from London's intrigues and dangers. She thought about children they might have someday, growing up without the shadow of espionage hanging over them. She thought about peace, safety, normalcy. Then she thought about the British sailors who would live because Pemberton's network had been destroyed. About future operations that might save countless lives if Nathaniel continued his work. About the difference they could make together if they chose to stay in this dangerous world. "I want to serve something larger than myself," she said finally. "I want our partnership to mean something beyond just managing estates and attending balls. I want to look back on our lives and know we made a difference, that we protected people who couldn't protect themselves, that we fought for something that mattered." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. "It will be dangerous. There will be times when I have to leave you, when we can't be together because the work demands it. There will be secrets we can't share even with each other, and there will always be the risk that someone will discover who we are and try to use it against us. I know, and I'm choosing it anyway. Choosing you, choosing this partnership, choosing to fight." She squeezed his hands. "But only if it's what you want too. If you want peace, if you want to walk away and build something simpler, I'll support that choice without hesitation." "You would give up this life for me?" "I would give up anything for you. I love you, Nathaniel. The work matters, but you matter more." He kissed her then, heedless of their audience, pouring everything he felt into that single moment of connection. When they finally pulled apart, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Then we do it together. Official positions, crown backing, all of it. But we do it as partners in every sense, with the understanding that if it ever becomes too much, if it ever threatens what we're building together, we walk away. Deal?" "Deal." They turned back to find the Prince Regent and his advisors watching with obvious amusement. "Well?" Sir Henry asked. "We'll take the official positions," Nathaniel said firmly. "On two conditions. First, my wife is granted equal authority and access to all intelligence, not as my assistant, but as my partner. Second, we maintain some autonomy in how we conduct operations. I won't return to the bureaucratic paralysis that allowed Pemberton to operate for years." Lord Castlereagh frowned. "That's highly irregular. So is a duchess personally confronting armed intruders and turning them against their employer through sheer force of will," the Prince Regent interrupted. "I think we can accommodate some irregularity given the results they've achieved." "Agreed, gentlemen." Sir Henry and Castlereagh exchanged glances, then nodded reluctantly. "Excellent." The Prince Regent stood, signaling the meeting's end. "You'll receive official letters of appointment within the week. Your cover will be consulting work for the Foreign Office, dull enough that no one will ask questions, prestigious enough to explain your activities. And Duke Ashford? Your Highness? Don't make me regret this. Your methods are effective but dangerous. Use them wisely." "Always, Your Highness." As they were escorted out, Lord Castlereagh pulled Nathaniel aside briefly. "There's one more thing. We've identified another potential network operating in the north. Manchester and Liverpool. Industrial espionage mixed with political agitation. It's not as immediately dangerous as Pemberton's operation, but it needs investigation. Interested? Nathaniel glanced at Eliza, who nodded slightly. We'll look into it. But first, my wife and I need to return to Ashford Hall. There are matters there that require attention, and we've been away too long. Of course. Take your time. The North won't explode overnight. Castlereagh paused. And Duke Ashford? Your father would be proud. He built the foundation, but you've built something stronger. Well done. The unexpected praise seemed to shake Nathaniel more than any of the threats or challenges had. He simply nodded, unable to speak. Outside Carlton House, Lady Margaret waited in the carriage, her expression anxious. When she saw them both smiling, relief flooded her face. Good news, I take it? Very good, Eliza confirmed as they climbed in. We've been given official positions, royal backing, everything we need to continue the work without constantly looking over our shoulders. Thank the heavens, I was preparing arguments for why you shouldn't be exiled or imprisoned. Lady Margaret smiled. So what happens now? Now, Nathaniel said, wrapping an arm around Eliza's shoulders, we go home, to Ashford Hall, and we finally start living the life we should have been building from the beginning. The journey back to Ashford Hall took 2 days by carriage. They could have traveled faster, but neither was in a hurry. After months of constant tension and danger, they needed the time to simply be together, talking, laughing, making plans for the future. When the estate finally came into view, Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. It looked different somehow, though nothing had physically changed. Perhaps it was just that she was different. No longer the frightened, uncertain girl who'd arrived here months ago, but a woman who'd proven herself in the deadliest arena imaginable. The servants greeted them with obvious joy. Mrs. Holloway actually smiled broadly, and Mr. Davies permitted himself a small nod of approval. Mary hugged Eliza impulsively before remembering her place and stepping back with flushed cheeks. Welcome home, Your Grace. We've missed you terribly. I've missed you too, all of you. Eliza looked around at the familiar faces. And I have news. His Grace and I will be spending much more time here from now on. London was educational, but this is our home. This is where we belong. That evening, they rode down to the village together, something Nathaniel had never done during his previous brief visits. Father Benedict met them outside the church, his eyes widening with surprise. Your Grace, and Your Grace, we didn't expect, that is, welcome home. Thank you, Father. Nathaniel dismounted and helped Eliza down. I wanted to see what my wife has been building here. I understand there have been significant improvements. Over the next hour, they toured the village, now transformed from the desperate, broken place Eliza had first encountered. The well worked perfectly, providing clean water. The cottages had been repaired. A new school building stood where a collapsing barn had been. Children played in the square, their clothes clean and their faces full instead of hollow with hunger. An elderly woman approached, Mrs. Blackwood, the grandmother who'd called Eliza an angel. She curtsied to Nathaniel, her expression wary. Your Grace, we've heard tales about you from London. Important work, they say, keeping England safe from enemies. Tales tend to be exaggerated, Nathaniel said carefully. Maybe so, but we also heard you near got yourself killed and your Duchess saved you. That true? Nathaniel glanced at Eliza with a slight smile. Entirely true, actually. My wife is considerably braver than I am. Well then, Mrs. Blackwood's wariness melted into something like approval. You're a lucky man, Your Grace. Your Duchess gave us back our dignity when we'd near forgotten what it felt like. She fought for us when no one else would. You'd best treat her accordingly. I intend to, madam, every day for the rest of our lives. Word of the exchange spread through the village within minutes. By sunset, when Nathaniel and Eliza prepared to ride back to the hall, nearly the entire population had gathered in the square. Father Benedict stepped forward to speak for them all. Your Graces, we wanted to thank you properly. Her Grace for everything she's done these past months, and Your Grace for your service to the crown, and for finally recognizing what a treasure you have in your wife. He smiled. We don't have much, but we wanted to give you this. A young girl approached carrying a simple wooden box. Inside was a beautifully embroidered cloth, clearly the work of many hands showing scenes from the estate and village done in intricate detail. Every woman in the village contributed to it, Father Benedict explained. It's meant to remind you that you're not just Duke and Duchess. You're part of this community. You're ours, and we're yours. That's what those vows mean, whether they're spoken in a grand church or lived out through years of service. Eliza felt tears streaming down her face as she accepted the gift. Nathaniel's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. When she looked at him, she saw his own eyes were suspiciously bright. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. "We'll treasure this always, and we promise, both of us promise, that we'll continue to serve this community with everything we have. You're not just our responsibility, you're our family." The villagers cheered, the sound echoing across the valley as the sun set behind the hills. It was a perfect moment, crystallizing everything they'd fought for and everything they'd become together. That night, back at the hall, they stood together on the balcony outside Nathaniel's chambers. No, their chambers now, as Eliza had moved all her belongings into his rooms while they were in London. Below them, the estate stretched out in the moonlight, peaceful and prosperous. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if we'd done this differently?" Nathaniel asked, his arms wrapped around Eliza from behind. "If I'd been brave enough to trust you from the beginning, instead of wasting months keeping you at a distance?" "Sometimes," Eliza admitted, "but I also think we needed that journey. You needed to learn that not every woman is Elena. I needed to prove to myself that I was strong enough to stand beside you as an equal. If it had been easy from the start, we might have taken it for granted. I would never take you for granted." He kissed her temple. "You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You transformed this estate, won over an entire village, saved my life, and somehow managed to make me believe in love again despite my very best efforts to remain miserable and alone. You make it sound like I did it all myself. You're the one who finally let down your walls, who trusted me with your truth, who stood beside me when society wanted to destroy me." She turned in his arms to face him. "We saved each other, Nathaniel. That's what partnership means." Speaking of partnership, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I know we're already married, but I never properly proposed. Never gave you a choice in any of this. So I wanted to do it right, even if it's months late." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple and elegant, with a single perfect sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "Eliza Hartwell Ashford, will you choose me? Not because duty demands it, not because you're trapped by circumstances, but because you want to. Will you be my wife in truth, my partner in everything, my love for the rest of our days?" Fresh tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks. "Yes. Always yes. I choose you, Nathaniel. Every day for the rest of our lives, I choose you." He slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band, then kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. "I have something for you too," Eliza said. She'd been waiting for the right moment, and this was it. "I'm pregnant." Nathaniel froze, his eyes widening with shock. "You're... what?" "Pregnant. About 6 weeks, the doctor thinks. I found out just before we left London, but with everything happening, I wanted to wait until we were home to tell you." She watched his face anxiously. "I know we didn't plan for this to happen so soon, and with the intelligence work, this is the best news I've ever received in my entire life." He swept her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We're having a baby! We're actually having a baby!" "We're having a baby," Eliza confirmed, laughing with him. "An heir to Ashford Hall, raised by parents who actually love each other. What a concept." "A revolutionary concept," Nathaniel agreed. He set her down carefully, his hands moving to her still flat stomach with wonder. "When I think about what our child will have, parents who are partners, an estate run with compassion instead of cruelty, a community that will help raise them," his voice caught. "They'll have everything I never did, everything I dreamed about as a boy trapped in my father's cold house." "They'll have us," Eliza said softly. "Imperfect, occasionally dangerous us, but they'll have love, Nathaniel, so much love, and they'll grow up knowing that their parents fought for them, for their future, for a better world." They stood there on the balcony as night deepened around them, making plans and dreaming aloud about the life growing inside Eliza. They talked about how they would balance the intelligence work with parenthood, how they would continue improving the estate, how they would raise their child to be both compassionate and strong. "We'll teach them everything," Nathaniel said. "How to manage an estate, how to treat people with dignity regardless of their station, how to fight for what's right even when it's dangerous. And above all, we'll teach them that love isn't weakness, it's the strongest force in the world." "Look at you," Eliza teased gently. "The cold duke who claimed love was a fiction. Now you're waxing poetic about it." "You changed me." He pulled her closer. "You refused to accept my walls, my distance, my determination to stay frozen. You fought for us when I'd given up on the possibility of happiness. And you showed me that trust isn't foolish, it's essential. I was so busy protecting myself from potential pain that I was guaranteeing misery. You taught me to be brave enough to hope again." "We taught each other," Eliza corrected. "You showed me that I was strong enough to face dangerous situations, that I could be more than just a decorative duchess, that I had value beyond my ability to be quiet and obedient. We made each other better, Nathaniel. That's what real partnership does." As the months passed, their life settled into a rhythm that balanced duty with joy. They continued intelligence work, but selectively, taking only the most critical assignments and always working as a team. Victoria became a frequent visitor to Ashford Hall, and she and Eliza developed an unlikely but genuine friendship. The estate flourished under their joint management. Nathaniel discovered he actually enjoyed the work of improving tenant farms and village infrastructure when it was approached as partnership rather than autocratic rule. Neighboring estates began copying their methods, and slowly, the entire region began to transform. Eliza's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued her work well into her 7th month, much to Lady Margaret's scandalized disapproval. But Nathaniel supported her completely, understanding that she needed to remain active and engaged. They only paused their intelligence activities in the final weeks, when even Eliza had to admit that climbing through warehouse windows while heavily pregnant was inadvisable. Their daughter was born on a cold December night, arriving with remarkable speed and a lusty cry that could probably be heard in the village below. Nathaniel, who'd insisted on being present despite the midwife's objections, wept openly as he held his child for the first time. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "She's beautiful," Eliza agreed, exhausted but glowing. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for months, but now, looking at their daughter's tiny face, Nathaniel knew exactly what she should be called. Catherine Eliza Ashford. Catherine for your strength and courage. Eliza for the woman who saved us all. And Ashford because she's going to inherit a legacy we built together, one of compassion, justice, and love. "Catherine," Eliza repeated, testing the name. "I like it." Catherine Ashford, future Duchess who will probably terrify London society just like her mother. One can only hope. The christening was held in the village church, with the entire community in attendance. Father Benedict performed the ceremony, his hand shaking slightly with the honor of baptizing the next generation of Ashford nobility. But it was what happened afterward that would be remembered for generations. Nathaniel stood before the assembled villagers with his daughter in his arms and Eliza beside him. He looked out at faces that had transformed from wary and broken to hopeful and strong. "Many of you have asked what changed when the new Duchess arrived," he said clearly. "Why things improved so dramatically, why the old cruel systems were finally dismantled. I want you to know the truth. It wasn't because I suddenly became enlightened or generous. It was because my wife refused to accept injustice. She fought for you when I was too blind to see what needed fighting for. She risked my anger, society's disapproval, and her own security to ensure you were treated with the dignity you deserved." He turned to Eliza, his eyes full of love. "Everything good that's happened here, every repaired cottage, every improved system, every child who no longer goes hungry is because of her courage. She's the one who transformed this estate. I'm just grateful she let me help." The church erupted in applause. Eliza felt tears streaming down her face as villagers who'd once viewed her with suspicion now looked at her with unmistakable love and respect. Mrs. Blackwood approached, taking baby Catherine gently from Nathaniel's arms. "We have something to tell you both too," the old woman said, her eyes twinkling. "The village council met last night. We voted unanimously. From this day forward, Ashford on the Green will be known as Catherine's Green, in honor of your daughter and everything she represents. The future you're building, the hope you've given us, the proof that nobility can serve instead of exploit. You can't, Eliza started, overwhelmed. We can, and we did, Father Benedict confirmed. The old name carried too many painful memories. This new name represents a new beginning. For all of us. Nathaniel's hand found Eliza's, squeezing tightly as they looked at each other through tears. This was the culmination of everything they'd fought for. Not just a marriage transformed from cold arrangement to passionate partnership, but a community restored and a legacy built that would outlast them both. That evening, back at the hall, they stood together in the nursery watching Catherine sleep in her cradle. Moonlight streamed through the windows, casting silver light across the room they'd prepared with such care. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day?" Nathaniel asked quietly. "When I walked away without offering my arm? I remember everything about that day. It was the worst and most important day of my life. You followed me down that aisle alone, and I actually thought that was how our marriage would be. Two people walking parallel paths, never really connecting, never truly together." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I was so wrong, so incredibly wrong." "We were both wrong about a lot of things," Eliza said, leaning back against him. "I thought I needed you to notice me, to validate me, to give me worth. But I had worth all along. I just needed to claim it for myself. And I thought I needed to stay distant to stay safe. But safety without connection isn't safety at all. It's just slow death." He turned her to face him. "Thank you for refusing to accept the marriage I tried to force on us. Thank you for fighting for something better. Thank you for loving me even when I didn't deserve it." "You always deserved it. You just needed to believe you did." Eliza touched his face gently. "We saved each other, Nathaniel. From loneliness, from fear, from lives half-lived. That's what love does. It saves us from our own worst instincts and shows us what we could be if we're brave enough to try." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "So what happens next?" Eliza asked. "We have a daughter to raise, an estate to manage, intelligence work to continue, and a whole life to build together. Where do we even start?" "We start here," Nathaniel said, gesturing to the nursery, their sleeping daughter, the estate beyond the windows. "We start with this moment, this family, this choice to keep choosing each other every single day. The rest will follow." "The rest will follow," Eliza echoed, settling into his embrace as they watched their daughter sleep. Outside, Ashford Hall stood proud against the night sky. No longer a cold, forbidding mansion, but a home filled with love, laughter, and hope. The villages prospered. The tenants thrived. And in London, when people spoke of the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, they spoke not of scandal or shame, but of partnership, courage, and a love story that had defied every expectation. What had begun as a marriage of duty had become something far greater, a union forged in fire, tempered by adversity, and strengthened by the refusal of one determined woman to remain invisible and one broken man's willingness to finally be seen. The Duchess, who was once ignored, had become the heart of everything the Duke couldn't live without. And together, they built a legacy that would echo through generations, proof that even the coldest arrangements could transform into the warmest love if two people were brave enough to fight for it. Years later, when young Catherine asked her parents how they fell in love, they would look at each other and smile. "It wasn't easy," Eliza would say. "It was terrible at first," Nathaniel would add, "but we refused to give up. We fought for each other. We chose each other. Every day." And that, they would say together, made all the difference. In the end, that was the truth they'd learned through months of pain and conflict and eventual triumph. Love wasn't something that simply happened. It was something you built, defended, and chose repeatedly in the face of every obstacle. It was partnership and trust, and the courage to be vulnerable with another person. It was work and joy intertwined, sacrifice and reward balanced perfectly. And for the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, it was the greatest adventure of their lives, one that began with duty and ended with devotion, transforming both of them into people they'd never imagined they could be. The forgotten Duchess had become unforgettable, and the cold Duke had learned to love again. Together, they proved that even the most broken beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings, if you were brave enough to fight for them.